All right. And I think we are live. And welcome everybody to CoCo Talk number 4. How are we today, everybody?
Good.
Yep. Good.
We are
CoCoFEST.
so far.
CoCoFest. We've got a full house here, so let me just read everybody off from left to right, top to bottom. From Australia, Nick Marentes. From somewhere in Canada, Bill Noble. John Strong is here. Hey, John. Brett Gordon is here. Sock Master is here. First time ever. We're very happy to have you, Mr. Master. John Kowalski. Curtis Boyle is here. John Linville is here. Barry Nelson, David Ladd, Mike Rowan. We've got 2/3 of the CoCo Crew podcast here with us as well. And myself, Original Gamer Stevie Stroh. And this is CoCo Talk. All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
How has everyone's week been this week? Has it been a great CoCo week?
Well, for me it has. I actually got my CoCo 3 upgraded to the 6309, back to the 90s for me again.
Nice. That was Bill, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I saw your picture on Facebook. Congratulations. Nice fully loaded CoCo. Yeah, I was having a few conversations with a few of you on the phone this week too, and the way I was explaining how like I've been feeling leading up to CoCoFest is I kind of call it like, you know, you have the Christmas spirit when you feel like it's getting close to Christmas time and you're all warm and fuzzy and tingly and you got a lot of love and goodwill towards everyone. I feel like right now we've got the CoCo spirit in us because it's so close to CoCoFest. You can't stop thinking about it, can't stop looking forward to it. So I've definitely been feeling the CoCo spirit lately.
Yeah, I have to say
Yes.
I'm getting a bit caught up in it too myself. I haven't had as much time to work on any CoCo projects because I've been busy catching up work, so I can take the week off to go down there. But
Mike, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, okay, great. It's hard to see. All I see is a little blue channel icon there, so it's great. Mike Rowan is here. It's very good. Latest episode of the CoCo Crew podcast is great. Hopefully you guys got my feedback. I told you how much I enjoyed it. That show continues to get better. Yeah, I'm very happy to have you guys here. Sock Master, it is a pleasure to have you too. I think a few of us were just starting to kiss your ass right before we started the live call, talking about how much we've enjoyed everything you've done and all your projects and everything else. So, very happy to have you. How have things been with you, John?
Well, I don't know. Life goes on. Things go.
Yeah. I don't know all the details, but I did see somewhere that you now also have a Donkey Kong Jr. remixed as well.
Yeah, that just came out like this week.
Okay. And now is that going to be available for the CoCo too? Is that only on arcade hardware?
That's on the arcade only, and it's a larger game than Donkey Kong, and it probably wouldn't fit on the CoCo.
Ah, okay.
It's not the way I did, the original Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong remix on the CoCo 3. The emulation business, because that takes a lot of memory, and the memory map on the CoCo 3, there's only 64K. You can make your program without really making things difficult. So it wouldn't fit.
Ah, okay. Is there a chance it might be available via emulation too, or is it just something you're going to just be providing in a physical only format?
For the moment, it's physical only.
Okay. That's cool, though. That's cool. So it's kind of like breathing new life into an old cabinet that you. And I would assume, like the other one, it also plays the original version, and you can kind of switch between the two.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. So if anybody has a Donkey Kong cabinet or any other type of cabinet, they can basically do this upgrade and have a whole new series of screens to try to tackle. That's pretty awesome.
Is the hardware in Donkey Kong Jr. the same or much the same as the Donkey Kong?
It's very similar. It's slightly revised for larger ROMs and a bit more graphics, and the sound hardware is a little bit modified, but on the whole, it's pretty much the same thing, just slightly changed.
Right.
Very cool. Yeah, I think I saw it popping up on YouTube. I haven't actually watched the video yet, but yeah, I'd definitely like to take a look at that.
They're so similar that somebody has started modifying Donkey Kong Jr. boards to be able to play Donkey Kong and switch between the two games. So that just shows you how similar the two boards are.
Oh, wow.
So while we're on the subject of Donkey Kong, I got a question for Sockmaster.
Okay.
Is there any chance of either Donkey Kong Remix or Donkey Kong getting a 2-player option?
It would be possible, but I just didn't consider it at the time that I put it together. It's just for convenience. There's only a 1-button operation in the game. You push the button to start, push the button to jump. Yeah, I would have to go through the thing and recompile it.
That sounds like a little bit of a project there, huh?
It'd be a project, especially since
Yeah.
I haven't looked at it in a long time, and you're wondering, like, where the heck is my stuff and what am I doing? 'Cause you forget these things real quick after you've done something.
Yeah, I would imagine. I don't know if you got a chance to catch the interview we did last weekend, the Sockmaster, with Chris Latham, who did Donkey King.
Yeah, I watched that.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, we asked him. We said, "Did you hear about Donkey Kong on the CoCo 3?" And he said, "Definitely." And he was pretty stoked to hear about that. So that's kind of cool. I thought that was awesome.
Is the source code available for Donkey Kong or Donkey Kong Remix?
No, it is not.
Darn.
Sounds like a project, Barry. Take the original ROM and disassemble it and see.
I imagine there may be some copyright issues with that too. So
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll jump in, and I'm going to read some of the responses. Maybe you guys chime in first, and then we'll read some of the responses. I had a question that I threw out to the CoCo mailing list, and I threw it out to the Facebook group, and I think we got a really good response here. And the subject was, what does it mean to be a member of the CoCo community? And I kind of compiled some thoughts that were in my head and some things I had seen floating around on various groups that I have been into. I've just picked up on different comments, and I have certain impressions of my own. And, I'm not sure what my own perceptions are, and I'm not trying to make any assumptions for anyone else, but I thought it'd be a pretty cool topic of discussion. And we sent it out there, and we got a lot of feedback. So I'll just give you the highlights of my question. And if you guys want to chime in, since I have you all here, we can just chime in on our own, and then I'll read some of the responses we got. But, I was basically saying, what does it mean to be a member of the CoCo community? What do people feel like if they're going to be a part of it? Some people are, they kind of just lurk, as they say, and don't really comment on things. Some people are doing a lot of hardware, some people doing a lot of software. There's various mix of skill levels and contributions. And so what I was trying to figure out is there any type of hierarchy to this community? Is there like this big Illuminati pyramid where you've got the upper echelon of CoCo Illuminary, and then you have the bottom feeders like me down here? What does it take to be like accepted in this community? If there are requirements for this, what do you got to do for somebody to accept you as being a legitimate member of this community? Does anybody feel like if you're new that you don't feel like you're being accepted as a newcomer or anything like that? One of the topics I keep hearing about is the great divide between OS 9 and RS-DOS. So I threw out some of those questions, and I got a lot of responses. And I'll just say for myself, this is the first and only retro community I've ever been in or known about. I didn't know retro communities existed, but I found out about everything. Simon's here. Hey, Simon, if you want to join the call, Simon Jonason just said hi in the text chat. I joined the community, and as far as I can tell, I've made a ton of friends, and I have what I consider to be kind of an extended family. And I feel like for myself, it's been a fairly positive experience. And, so that's my short answer, but I figured I'll throw it out there if you guys all want to chime in on what it's like to be a member of the community and what your experience has been and stuff like that. Just have at it.
Who wants to go first?
Well, I don't know about a membership to the community. I mean, it's free for all.
It's free admission.
Yeah, anyone can join. I guess you don't have to have anything to contribute, or even you can be a lurker. So yeah, I don't know about a membership to the community. I'm here, so they haven't kicked me out yet.
And myself, I've been in pretty well all the roles you've mentioned there over the years. So, except for hardware development, I don't do that. But I've done software development, and I sometimes will be active answering questions. Other times, I just lurk and kind of follow around, and other times I'm just playing games like Steve does. And so I've been in each of the roles, and I think it's like any family. Occasionally, you have little squabbles between certain members and stuff here, but I think as a whole, it's pretty family-like, and most of the time, people are trying to help each other out.
Agreed. I think the most overwhelming experience for me was being at CoCoFEST last year and just meeting, somewhere like 80 some odd people who are all into the same thing that I'm into. And obviously the credit for making me want to go to CoCoFEST was listening to the CoCo Crew podcast, just hearing about it and having this interest in it. And then all the, everybody in the, in all the various groups saying, yeah, you should come to CoCoFEST. And I'm like, what's a CoCoFEST? And, all that kind of stuff. There were so many people there. I think my only regret was not being able to spend enough time with everybody and getting to learn more and hear more. And I definitely want to try to do more of that this year. And I definitely want to feel like I've been kind of welcomed. I feel like I'm in great company. I feel for the most part, just look at who we have here in this call right now. Curtis and Sockmaster and John Strong and Brett and Nicholas and Barry. And you guys have been members for a long time. Mike Rowan. You guys all have a lot of expertise in your own rights in your own areas. And none of you are, treating anybody else any differently for whatever they do or don't know. And so it's definitely a great knowledge sharing group as well, I think.
I agree.
Oh, that's for sure. I've had many questions that have been answered by the entire group.
Yeah. And sometimes when I see the comment when somebody says, I had no idea there was a podcast, I just want to shake somebody sometimes, like, how can you not know this? But the nice thing is that even if the same question has been asked 1,000 times, everybody's very polite when they answer the question, so it's just like, it's been great. So who just joined us? Simon Jonason, are you with us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
The Madman is here. Hello, Simon.
Hello, mate.
Welcome.
The twin of Brett.
A lot of you guys got your family photos done all taken at the same place, apparently. So.
Yeah. and apparently it involves seizures, but...
Yeah. Curtis and I met for the first time at CoCoFEST. We had been, kind of communicating over Skype and working on projects, so we knew each other for a while, and we got to hang out. David Ladd, got to meet you. I got to meet John Strong. I got to meet Neil and Mike Rowan and John Lanville. I've met Brett Gordon. I met Barry. Who else is here? I haven't met Bill Noble yet, but yeah, and I haven't met Sockmaster. But most of you here in this call, I've met at CoCoFEST, and it was awesome.
I think you were mentioning how you're surprised when you hear somebody say that they didn't know there was a podcast. The surprising part for me has been how often it's been somebody that was a member of Glenside or somebody that goes to
So true.
and they still didn't know that there was a podcast, or at least they pretend they didn't listen. It's we have we get about well over 1,000. Let's put it that way. We get well over 1,000 downloads per episode, and these people are coming from somewhere, and yet they don't seem to be coming totally from the known CoCo people. The people on the mailing list and the people that go to CoCoFest. So, we have those discussions once in a while. How big is the CoCo market? Is it worth producing anything just for CoCo people? Well, there's a number of us out there, and I guess it depends. I mean, if you want to be the next American Idol or whatever, we're not really big enough for that. But if you want to be able to produce 15 or 20 copies of whatever you're working on and make your money back, we're more than big enough for that. So, Anyway, just my little plug.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Mike. I think the great thing about CoCoFest is when you meet people face to face, or when you're you're just around other people's conversations. They say ideas have sex. So when when two people have ideas and they come together, you end up with something even more interesting. So it's pretty inspiring just to hear people's conversations, see what they're working on, and it kind of gets you pumped up.
I tell you what, the intro for that sounded wrong.
Ideas have sex.
That's right.
Well, it's not immediate. You have to have an introduction. You have to build an attraction and a relationship. Dinner is involved. There's a courting process.
That explains all the beer buying at the Friday night. So
Yeah, money changes hands. We have some people joining us in the.
I have two teenagers over here, so let's keep it down there, okay, boys?
We have a few people joining us in chat too. So Bruce Moore is here in chat. He says, "Hey Stevie, glad to join the show live. I am from Winnipeg, Canada. My son Jacob and I will be at CoCoFEST. Bob Hoskins is here. Is the Coco still around? I heard it stopped. Glenn Hewitt is here. Hi everyone. I've been enjoying these videos and I'm glad to be here live." Bob Hoskins again. How can I change my screensaver? How do I change my screensaver? Okay. And Bruce Moore said, "Hey Simon." Hey Bruce. So Bruce I just saw Bruce putting up a picture on Facebook where he had a hardware hack where he could inverse the video on his CoCo, and I know Bruce Moore was showing up as a question mark on what he was going to do. I'm going to bring up the Glenside website real quick, and I'm going to see what the latest mentionings here are there. So when we go to CoCoFEST and we go to vendors right now, let's see. So we have, as our vendors right now, we have Carl, we have Boise, we have Brendan Donahue, we have Bruce Moore. Yeah, Bruce Moore, with very handsome gentleman too, Bruce, I must say. I like that picture there. But Bruce Moore is still the mystery man as far as what he's going to have at his exhibit. Cloud9, Mark Marlette, Frank Patel is going to be here. I think Frank had mentioned a comment too, where which got me thinking about this topic, where he said that for many years the CoCoFests were also kind of viewed of as a kind of like a family reunion, and so they were a little bit reluctant to share things with live streams and things like that. But I think it's gotten a little bit more mainstream, and hopefully we're not violating any sanctities of anything here. Brian is going to be here. Brian is a Goers. And Brett Gordon, okay, Linda Pedraza, Hawksoft, J Systems, that's Ben Anding, Jim O'Keefe, John Mark Mobley, John Linville, then we have William Astle, Mike Rowan, Neil Blanchard, Retro Innovations, Jim Brain, and Richard and Brenda, myself, Strongware, Sub Etha Software, Alan Huffman, The Music Man, and Wally so far. These are our different exhibitors. Has anything changed on the lineup of events, or is that still about the same right now? We have the show opening. We have our keynote with Rick Adams, which I'm really looking forward to. We have John Linville's new CoCo audio presentation, Text Adventure authoring. We have lunch, game development tools by John Strong. Looking forward to seeing those in person. Vintage is the new world. The vintage is the new world.com. Sorry, I can't read that. Mining the Rainbow Magazine award ceremony. We have our auction, the minimum no bid auction, which was always a treat. The on-site dinner, that was great. The barbecue dinner. Trivial contest was a great source of entertainment. Optimizing Basic presentation by Alan Huffman. CoCo Chat and possible CoCo Jam as well with live music. Sunday show opening, the future of CoCo gaming by John Strong, so probably some hardware presentations as well. Fuzix, Fuzix. Is Brett here? Brett, can you give us the final pronunciation on the X?
Yes. It is not known how we actually say it yet. We're still in committee on that.
Okay. We're going to just call it FX.
We'll just call it that F word.
And I'm looking forward to seeing the VGA update by Brendan Donahue. I'm sure, obviously from what we've seen in the videos, a lot of progress has been made there since last year. lunch. We're going to have another auction. We're going to clean up the show, and we're going to have dinner. I think from what I read from John Mark Mobley, the dinner is going to be at Fuddruckers again, and we're somehow going to try to incorporate current and former Radio Shack employees on this dinner if they're able to join us. And, of course, not to forget to touch the heron while we are there as well. So that's the current lineup for CoCoFest. And so Bruce is there. So Bruce says, hello, Simon. So glad for his help recently. And Bruce also says the 4K CoCo 1. Yes, inverse video. So Bruce is going to show off his inverse video CoCo. Very cool. Cool stuff.
Can't you just inverse the video in software by manipulating FF22?
Yes, FF22. 088 sets the 8 will set the inverse character set. So
it's not as cool as flipping a switch, though. Come on, let's be real here. If you want to show off a hardware project, you can't do a hardware project with a FF whatever you just said there.
I'll give you that, and I can see where we're having the inverse. If you've got a program that manipulates FF22 for itself, you can still set inverse video if you've got a hardware switch.
Yeah.
There were quite a few people back in the 80s actually did do that modification because it was much easier to read on a TV of that glaring green block of nuclear green. So
yeah, nuclear green. Yeah.
The nuclear colors come from SG6. Then you've got nuclear pink.
Oh yes. Oh my God. That's like the other P mode 3 mode too, with the purple and green and orange and the stuff that makes your eyes want to melt.
Nuclear pastels, yeah.
SG6 is just wrong, it's just wrong. If you look at it, oh my God.
Inverse video almost makes it look like a 32 column green screen monitor. So a lot of people did the hardware mod back in the day.
Yeah. I think if there's any question as to the scale and scope of our CoCo community, look at what we have right now. We have Nick in Australia. We have Bill Curtis and Sockmaster in Canada. We have Simon in Denmark, right, Simon?
Yes.
You were there with Fedor. We've got CoCo people in the UK. He's not here today, but I'm having a brain freeze on his name right now. Who's the French guy? Who's the French guy who's working... what is it? Hugo Defort, Hugo Defort had put up a map one time that showed where we all are around the world. It's pretty impressive. I think the community is global. Are we considered to be still a small community for a retro community compared to like the Atari and the Commodore and Amiga and things like that?
I would say we're probably smaller. We're better, obviously, but
and modest as well.
Knowledge exists, but I think we since we've had the podcast and getting our word out a little more, I think we're getting a little more respect from some of the other podcasts at least, and see a little more recognition at events like BCF East and Southeast and that sort of thing. So.
Very cool.
I think the Facebook page helps as well.
Yes.
I can tell you one thing: if we had it, that we would probably grow our community quite a bit. Which would be if we could get the FPGA color computer, the FPGA implementation of a CoCo 3 to be self-sufficient, and then package it up in some sort of or even if it was just a Lucite cover, and get those things so they're easy to set up and easy to use. I know it's getting there, but the last I checked, I think they still rely on a separate DriveWire server to boot up.
Is that true for Roger Taylor's as well as Glenn Becker's versions?
Not true for Rogers. Rogers is a complete standalone system now.
Okay, that is what we're calling CoCo on a chip, and is that also known as the Cyclone hardware?
Cyclone. Yeah, Roger really hasn't nailed down an actual name for it yet.
Okay, the Facebook group's called CoCo on a chip right now.
Is it stable, or is he still ironing out the sharp points?
No, it is actually very stable. He just actually, about 2 months ago, implemented the true 6809 core, as well as got the timing for doing actually John Kowalski's demo videos, actually almost perfect.
Good way to test a CoCo is throwing a Sockmaster program to see if you break it.
Has he got the joysticks working?
No, still no joysticks as of yet. He's kind of put that kind of on the back burner because he's now looking at getting the full FAT32 system working on the SD card.
Yeah, because right now it's using sort of custom.
Yeah, it's
thing for
using
formatting stuff,
Tim Franklin's CoCoPack system, which it's okay, it's nice, but it's a little difficult to work with.
Yeah, and that's getting to Barry's point. You want it to be simple. You just turn it on and it's a CoCo in hardware, basically.
Yeah,
right.
Actually, that's where Roger's going. Is he's actually wanting to duplicate the SDC format onto the actual CoCo on the chip.
So will it be able to read the CoCo SDC cards directly? You can use them on either a real CoCo or on the...
Either or, yes. Because he's actually, he sent me the source code for the drivers for the SD card, and he actually wants me to update it for the FAT32, so...
Okay. Yeah, because it sounds like that's going the direction that Barry wants, which is to get something you can just, take out of a box if you bought it. And it's just ready to go. And if you already have a real CoCo with an SDC, you can just take your card out and plug it right in and go. And
that's basically what I'm going to need, because I am a non-techno person when it comes to custom hardware inventions,
When he gets the joystick going, then I'll buy it.
Yeah, likewise, when it gets joystick and solid disk emulation that is fully floppy compatible, that's going to be quite an interesting product. And I think that's going to open the CoCo up to a lot of people that right now, are stuck just doing it under emulation.
I'll tell you what. Have you guys heard of the Retron 5? It's like an emulated console where you can plug in the cartridges. It'll run Nintendo and Sega, and it runs like 5 different major 8-bit console systems. Have you guys heard of that system before?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a thing you can buy. It's like $120. It's not very expensive. I just came across one that's a high-end Nintendo emulator that's based on the Cyclone hardware, FPGA-based thing. They're selling this thing in a fancy aluminum box for about $500 frickin' dollars, and it is an emulated NES. They call it the Cadillac of Nintendo systems, and it'll accept the original cartridge and the original controllers, and they've come up with a Bluetooth wireless enabled dongle where you can either use their custom Bluetooth one or wirelessly enable an old controller. But they're selling this frickin' thing for $500. Now, obviously, everybody in the world knows what a Nintendo is and knows what the NES is. And when that NES Mini went on sale, at Christmas time, they were price gouging that thing. People were buying those frickin' things for $500 because they couldn't find them in the store. I'm not saying that the CoCo could sell for $500 because it's not as well known, but I'm thinking of like what we're saying here. If there is a reliable, solid state, functional appliance that you can just plug in and use, I think we could open this up to another market. Now, granted, you could buy a real CoCo for $50, $100, and it's a little bit of a crapshoot when you buy it on eBay. But I've gotten dozens of them; and they've all worked. But user friendly.
Not a CoCo 3 for that price that I've seen.
I've got a CoCo 3 for $100. I got lucky.
Lucky you.
Yeah, with shipping. Not trying to brag, but
trying to rub it in, but not trying to brag.
Yeah. I bought it as a non-working CoCo, and so he didn't think it worked, and it worked.
Yeah, I'm going to chime in.
Even $300 is fairly cheap when you consider it is a CoCo 3. It does include a power supply. It does include a plastic injected case. Where are you going to get that on an FPGA one at the moment?
Mm-hmm.
No, we're not going to get a plastic injected case, but for Rogers, my first good prototype is done for the case for it. So
that's John Strong, everybody.
Yep.
John Strong, the king of CoCo cases.
I have one of them myself.
Yeah.
Same here.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Let me get to some of the feedback we got on when I put this out on the CoCo mailing list. So some of the first responses were Alan Huffman came in talking about the Great Divide. And Alan said that some of the divide is too much choice. We've got Facebook, we've got Google Plus, we've got the email list. There's a Delphi forum that's still going. Curtis jumped in talking about, don't forget CompuServe, and I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but is it Reitveld? Talking also about the Delphi list, and Mark Overholzer chimed in, says, I'm somewhat new to the CoCo. I started about 5 years ago. Was more of an Apple person, but he says he's purchased 2 CoCos. He's got 2 MPIs. He says there is a hierarchy, but as a newcomer, I felt very welcome. He says I'm unqualified to comment on how veterans feel. He says, I would assume that CocoNets have the same mindset. And so that was some of the chimes in there. Zipster chimed in. That's Ed Snyder, who makes a lot of our awesome hardware. I was surprised to learn that Ed Snyder was somewhat new to the CoCo. Zipster calls himself a newbie to the community, and when I came in, he seemed like the establishment. This guy was just making so much stuff, But Zipster kind of came in new, Ed Snyder. So he chimed in and kind of shared some of his background. It's a great thread, which you should pick up on the CoCo mailing list. I'm not going to sit here and read everything verbatim, but we got a lot of people chiming in. I found that interesting that Zipster referred to himself somewhat as a newbie.
Scott, he is. He hasn't been around that long. In terms of personalities and that sort of thing, he came in, he picked up manufacturing of Darren Atkinson's CoCo SDC design, and it's good he's been providing those. He did also he produced copies of the composite video output cards for the CoCo 2s. Those were handy. He's done some other projects as well, but like I said, it's only been 2 or 3 years. As far as if I could address the Great Divide, the one you mentioned, that the OS9 disk extended color basic, I think you'll find the only people who think there's a Great Divide there are people who really are old timers from back when there really was a Great Divide back in the 80s or early 90s.
Okay.
You're talking about me and Nick, aren't you?
Well, yeah, sort of. I think most people who were not swept up in the Divide then don't really care about the Divide now. We'll use OS9 if there's something to run on it. We'll use disk extended color basic or whatever when we have stuff to run there. Now on the other side, you're talking about the places to communicate. There is still Delphi, sort of. There is Google Plus. Nobody uses them. The people pretty much only use Facebook and the mailing list. And you correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see hardly anything else anywhere else. So just my say.
There you go. Hey, while I have you, John, I just got a quick question for you too, because I think the answer is maybe somewhat rhetorical, but one of the thoughts in the back of my mind is the fact that we are talking about CoCo right now on a weekly basis, and granted we're leading up to CoCoFest. I was thinking that I'm hoping this isn't going to saturate the market, so to speak, with stuff for the podcast, but I'm thinking it's probably even going to give you guys more things to think about. And I'm probably not the only person who could never get tired of listening to CoCo's stuff, but I was just wondering, hopefully this is not feeling like it's going to take away from anything else that's going on, especially with what you guys are doing on that great podcast show.
Well, as far as I know, we'll still make the podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure of that.
Honestly, I wish you nothing but the best, but I predict that the interest in weekly discussions will wane somewhat as CoCoFest goes into the background. I could be wrong, but it's every year I've got my own group that's a little closer in or whatever, and every year before a podcast, suddenly all our little private chats are on fire. And then we get through the CoCoFest, and then they die off a little bit. And I suspect you'll see some of that. I don't know. Could be wrong. The other thing is, this year, once we get past CoCoFest, of course, 6 months later we have Tandy Assembly. So if you'd like to get all hyped and excited about Tandy Assembly, I definitely invite you to do that.
Yes. Oh yeah.
We'll see you show up in Ohio and come and hang out with us.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, we're hoping that'll kind of stave off the the post-fest blues that everybody usually gets. It is the Christmas analogy is pretty good because after Christmas you feel like, oh, I got another year.
Yeah.
So,
No,
so now you just have 6 months to Tandy.
It's mid-Christmas. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I kind of expected too that we might switch to a bi-weekly or a monthly thing just so we have more to talk about. But I think the idea of continuing CoCo Talks between the podcast and live, what I love about the podcast is there is a formula to it, and it's a formula that works. It's very structured, it's very well produced, and I never get tired of listening to it. Where this is the complete opposite of that. There's not really a formula of a structure. It's very long form, but it's also very interactive too. So a lot of interesting things have been coming out of this as well. So I think there's probably room for both of these things, and I think both will probably help feed each other with content and ideas and things like that.
Sure. Well, I really liked. I saw somewhere you suggested the monthly podcast listening party.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that. I was thinking about that for a while, and then I was thinking, well, who is going to be crazy enough to want to do that? But right now, we've got 11 people watching us live. There's just about that many of us here in the discussion too. So probably at least 24 people would probably want to do that. So I don't know if anybody else is a fan of The Walking Dead, but we always watch Talking Dead after The Walking Dead. So I'm thinking about Talking CoCo Crew or something where we have an after party and we talk about everything that we liked on the podcast.
Yeah, and if John and Mike and Neil listen to the comments in there too, it'll save me having to type all these stupid emails.
We should turn the comments into a submission form, and that way I can just copy and paste them.
Yeah. One of the things that so for me, being in a retro community and being in the CoCo community are one and the same. And for me, this journey has been a little bit less than 2 years because I've only been doing YouTube for 2 years, and I didn't get into the CoCo part right away. So, not even 2 years I've been a member of this. One of the things I did as I was discovering all these things is I created a website, or I put it on my website, and it was basically a cheat sheet for me to not have to have like 4,000 bookmarks. I created a page of CoCo links, and so I put out a message recently, and I got a few updates. And also what I did recently too is I've actually just changed the theme to my website, and so I'm going to show you guys here real quick. This is the latest version of my website. And this is just ogsteviestro.com, but I do have a URL I created called amacoconut.com. So if you go to amacoconut.com, it's going to take you to this page here. And I've tried to organize things. So I've got a list of color computer communities. So we've got the Google Plus group. We've got the Facebook group. We've got the link to the mailing list. We've got a link to the Glenside community, Glenside Color Computer Club, who hosts CoCoFEST. I did put together a short list of YouTube channels. I've got a list of like the Color Computer Archive, CoCopedia. I think TandyCoco.com is now down. Radio Shack catalogs. I've got some of Curtis Boyle's websites broken by category. Got a list to emulators here. I got a list where you can download CoCo software. And I reorganized the list of blog and project sites, and I just got added. The Pac-Man port was added. Brendan's CoCo VGA is added. So as I discover these things, I will add these things. So if anybody out there right now is saying, well, how can I find out about the CoCo? Well, this is what I've learned so far. So if you go to my website and you just go to ogsteviestro.com, there's that list. And I also encourage anybody to help me either add content or remove content that's become stale. And a side note is I would love to find a way to make this self-serving where people can add their own links to it. I don't know that much about web development, and maybe that's pie in the sky, but I know technology, very few things are not possible. I would love it where anybody can just upload their own link, and just add to the list. That'd be awesome. But in the meantime,
you have to be careful with that, or you'll end up with links to some very interesting things from your CoCo.
Yeah. So we'll probably have to put an approval process in there, but to allow the information to be submitted would be helpful,
Maybe a wiki or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But anyway, so if somebody out there is watching right now and says, how can I find out more about this CoCo? That's one place to do it. You can just, go to my website. And Steve Bosco is here. Steve Bamford, who we call Bosco, sorry about that. He also replied to the CoCo mailing list. He said, great topic for discussion, not being from the U.S. and never having owned a CoCo. I see myself as an outsider. He said, I didn't even realize there was a Dragon community until a few years ago. And he says, I stay on the periphery of things, but I will say this, there's great energy and positivity found amongst the CoCo community, and long may it continue. So thank you for that, Steve Bamford. Lots of responses on the community. I myself have, like I say, I've felt welcome to it. I feel like I always feel just in life in general, I always feel like I'm a little bit of an outsider and an odd duck in any situation, so I don't know that I'll ever fully feel like I fit in anywhere, but I'll definitely say when it comes to cocoa nuts, I feel like I'm amongst brethren. I think the term, it's Darren Grant is here. Darren Grant just showed up in the chat. Hello, Darren Grant. Nice to have you. That's such a great what a great find that you guys got a hold of Darren Grant, and that interview was absolutely amazing with Tandy UK. And so Darren's here, and Darren says if you're using WordPress, there are plugins for that. Okay, that's cool. I need somebody. Maybe I might come across as being somewhat intelligent, but when it comes to most things, I'm a complete idiot. So I know what a plugin is, but for me to make that work, I probably won't be able to figure that out. So I'm open to some help with that. And also Bruce says, I think you want to manually edit the list yourself to protect spam links. That's a good point. So we'll figure it out. Glenn Hewitt's here. Glenn Hewitt says, everybody in the mailing list has been a great help to me. CoCo users rock. Thank you, Glenn. That's awesome. Another topic that came up on the list this week was what are the different forms of BASIC, and I think a few people chimed in on that. I will be the last person to claim to be an expert, but I feel more and more informed every time I listen to a new podcast because there's just a lot of good information out there. I kind of shared the versions of BASIC that I was familiar with, like the regular BASIC, the extended BASIC, the microcolor BASIC. It was brought up about BASIC 09 is another one, right? It was also brought up that the BASICs were shipped on different types of ROM chips as well. So is this true that now standard BASIC and extended BASIC are actually two different chips that go in different sockets on a CoCo? Because I wasn't even aware of that myself.
On the original CoCos, yes. And then they can later combine it as a single chip.
As a super ROM. Oh, Simon just turned on his camera. All right. How are you, Simon? The madman is here.
No, I didn't.
No. We shouldn't have said anything. We could have spied on him like the NSA. So.
And I was just about to compare him and Brett right next to each other in the window.
So a little while ago, we were talking about the RS-DOS to OS9 quote-unquote divide, and I think one of the things that still creates the divide is the learning curve for somebody to get into OS9 and Nitrous 9. Yeah. I've already picked up a lot of the stuff I used on OS9 back in the day, so it was just a matter of me learning the differences between OS9 and Nitrous 9, which there aren't that many. One of the things I've tried to do on some of the disks I've distributed and whatnot is update the help files with information for some of the new commands in the Nitrous 9 versions. But I think, one of the things that would help would be an updated manual page for Nitrous 9 with all the stuff organized by command categories, etc., to make it easier for somebody to get started with that.
I think there was a wiki page that were starting to do some of the additional stuff, but I don't think it ever got finished, if I remember correctly.
It didn't get too far, no.
Yeah.
I think I tried to sign into...
Sorry, go ahead.
I think I tried to sign into the wiki and it kept rejecting me. It wouldn't let me sign in.
No, I haven't been on it for a while, but I do remember they'd been mentioning there's some more new display commands that I'd added and a few others had added. There's some new get stat calls that Bill and I added, and I'm sure Boise and everybody else has added on since. But yeah, I don't know if there's a full manual that covers all the old stuff that's still in there and the new stuff, so it's like one nice organized manual like the original one was. But yeah, you're right. There is a bit of a divide because of the learning curve for OS9. OS9 Nitrous 9 is definitely a lot more steep than Disk Extended Basic. It's like going from DOS to Unix. I mean, it's just a more complicated operating system, so it definitely is a lot more to grasp.
No, one of these days that'll be on my list of things to tackle. And Curtis, maybe you can help me, and we'll do a little YouTube tutorial series on that as well.
Yeah, we'll just have to get Nick to watch it.
Learning OS9 in 6,809 steps.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
A YouTube tutorial would probably be helpful, but I think we really need to have a manual that people can go through and just read and reference and use as a point of reference for working with it. Because I think that's one of the big things that's creating a hesitation for people that aren't familiar with it to get involved with it, because there's really no good. And I've seen some coming onto the mailing list asking questions about how does this work, how does that work. They couldn't find a reference on the web for certain commands and band pages, etc.
Yeah, and they're finding like the original OS9 manuals, and they've changed the commands a lot, so they don't work the same. So they try an example and it doesn't work, and they get frustrated and they quit.
Yep.
What? Who technically is the quote unquote owner of OS9 right now?
I don't think there is an owner. I mean, when we released it, it was basically just it's the communities now, and whoever wants to be involved is involved.
Are you talking about OS9 or Nitrous 9?
Nitrous 9, whatever. Nitrous 9. Okay.
9, yeah, because when Curtis and I turned it over, we had pretty much over 60% changed in the entire system. So it basically became our own copyright, which we basically released to the community.
Yeah, and then Boise took it over, and then a bunch of other people would join in. Now, I don't know who's kind of in. Is there anybody kind of in charge of the check-ins now?
Tormund is actually doing that now.
Okay.
I can't remember his last name. It starts with a V. Volden, I think it is.
Yeah. So he's not like an owner per se, or totally in charge of it. But he's kind of the checkpoint.
He monitors the check-ins and checkouts and submissions.
So is there a project team, so to speak, and is there team leader or contacts and people who can submit bug reports and feature requests and things like that?
It's too long.
Bill knows more than I do.
It's more going through Tormund itself, because actually Bill Pierce just added Gary's project into the FPGA, from the FPGA into the Nitrous 9 Source Forge, and also Neil Crook's FPGA project is now in there too. And that was all done through Tormund himself.
Yeah, because I think anybody can contribute to it, and there is a bug reporting system built into SourceForge. So if people want to report bugs, you can do it there. But the one problem with it is that SourceForge is set up for developers. So if you're not a developer and you want to report a bug as a user, it's not the easiest thing to get into.
So OS9 like.
You would think with it being a multitasking operating system, things would be happening so much more efficiently.
Oh, it is. Man. That's why you have issues with sound.
I'm just going to call Nick Gray Divider from now on.
Oh, man.
It's meant for two different markets, though, and two different types of people. I mean, the people that want to use a full-blown operating system tend to be the, more geeky, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. The people that, as Nick has pointed out, and this is very true, I mean, the people that want to write games write to the actual hardware, and they want everything out of the way. They don't want an OS in the way. So they tend to favor that. And the people that want to, get various things done or do, just the actual development parts of things, it's a bit easier with an OS because then you don't have to write, custom code just to read and write a file from a disk type thing. So each has their strengths, and it's kind of waned both directions. Like Nick and I were talking about this earlier in private, that the 90s and the early 2000s, that was basically when Nitrous 9 was like where all the new development on the CoCo was happening. And now at this point, it's actually kind of shifted the other way, because now it's all the game developers and cartridges and everything else with some hardware that's shared between both, like the CoCo SDC. So it goes back and forth depending on who's getting involved and what they're doing.
I would say that it is not too hard to write actually a game under Nitrous 9. Because you can pretty much take over the system from there. But once you do that, of course, the other stuff that's running, you've changed it from a multitasking OS to basically single task. But you can use it as a platform to pretty easily load and start a game, which would then take over the whole system.
Yeah, and to be honest, Alan DeCock actually wrote Rusty for kind of that kind of thing too, where you can actually tell it to load off your local hard drive a program and then run it as a single RS-DOS quote-unquote task.
And actually, I've successfully done that too, Barry, where I've actually loaded a complete program under OS9, completely stopped OS9, had the program take over, and then actually returned to OS9 perfectly where you left off, coming back.
think you've got to ask.
I can see where that's possible, but that is impressive.
Yeah, the only thing is you got to watch where you're touching in system RAM.
You've got to ask.
I was going to write something like a game that was going to take over the system. I'd probably just have it when it exits. I'd probably just have it do a reboot.
And that's actually exactly what Alan did. He had to just reboot back to OS 9 from a cold start. But I actually returned right back to the original shell you launched from.
Nick, you had a comment?
You've got to ask, what do people use a retro computer for? What's the main thing when they turn a computer on? Especially someone who's, just has the retro computer for collection-wise. He gets into a certain market. What is it they do with that computer? What is it that they're interested in doing with it?
Yeah, and I think that's different for everybody. I mean, some people just want to do retro gaming. So
I think a lot of people are probably not interested in using it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, far away.
I was going to say, I think a lot of people I doubt very many people are using it for any serious use as far as balancing their budget or doing their finances on it or anything like that in this day and age. So I would suspect that probably a lot of the use is gaming, and then probably some of the remaining use is probably just demonstration and history to show people, okay, well, this is what the machine was like, this is what people used to use, etc.
Yeah, and to show its capabilities, because I mean, the whole point of retro computing, well, at least for some of us, is to see how far you can push this old hardware. Because back in the day, people were trying to rush out products as fast as they could to get them on sale, and wasn't taking the time to optimize it as well as the hardware could be optimized. And that's when we get people like Sockmaster coming in and showing, this is what it could really do if you took the time to do it. But people were on production schedules back then, so you didn't see too much of that. So I think that's where Nick and a few others now are pushing to show, if we had the time back in the day, we had all the knowledge that we have now. This is what we could have pulled off. Like if you did Donkey Kong, like Sock's port, if you had released that back in like 88, 89, I mean, that would have just been phenomenal.
Yeah, you'd be sued.
License it, yeah.
That is my point. That is my point. That reflecting back on the OS 9/RS-DOS thing, OS 9 may be very powerful, and it is very powerful. The thing is, not many people use it for serious use. Why would you use a color computer to do your budgeting or your word processing and all that? It's crazy. We've all got PCs and Macs, and nowadays they'd rather use that. So all this serious stuff is really is not important anymore. Games, on the other hand, they are.
I suspect there's a bit of a bias there.
It's true. I have my Nitrous 9 partition on my machine primarily set up to run a bunch of OS 9 games. Thus, my concern that I can't get my darn Cave Walker to run under Nitrous 9 level 2. But most of what I have on that disk partition, I've got my languages and my development kits and all that stuff out there. But I've also got all the games that were released for OS 9 set up so I can launch them, and that's a lot of what I use that partition for these days.
And having all that development software and all that, it's all good and well, but it's no good if you don't actually develop anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, OS 9 was really for a lot of utilities. But I mean, we were back in like Nick and I were discussing back in the 90s and the early 2000s when BBSs were still pretty big. I mean, a lot of development went on. I mean, the FidoNet echoes and stuff through RIBs. I mean, there was no RS-DOS program to get this running at all. And yet, you could actually host a mail system. I think, Bill, you hosted one for a while yourself, didn't you?
Yes, I did, actually. It ran for quite a while. A couple of years, if I remember right.
Yeah, so, I mean, we were sharing CoCo information on the CoCo FidoNet echoes, which is kind of the equivalent of the listserv lists that, later came out separately on Usenet, et cetera. So we were supporting the community in a way that, under RS-DOS, I don't think anybody would have taken the time to write serial drivers and everything else to get all that stuff running. So it was easier for that. But yeah, I mean, the market's changed. I mean, most retro computing now, I think, is game playing, and that probably is the majority of it. There's a few people that probably they got so used to a program. It's like watching some of these old book authors, that still use WordStar and refuse to use anything newer because they got so used to the key sequences. They're not going to touch Microsoft Word or LibreOffice or any of this stuff. So, I mean, there's a few diehards I imagine probably still are balancing their checkbooks on it, but it'd be pretty few and far between at this point.
I believe those are mostly in the Amish communities. James Ross has joined us, says, I just started watching about 5 minutes ago. Bruce Moore was asking, does Basic 09 compile? That might get me into it. James said something about it compiles into P code, which is interpreted. Bruce Moore says, I used my CoCo to teach coding to my son, so it's more than just gaming. And then there's a question about P code. So you guys want to chime in on compiling with Basic 09 if that's an option, and what that actually does for somebody? Because I'm a little bit curious about that as well.
Well, it is faster than RS-DOS. I mean, the fact that it has integer variables and real, which means you can choose integers, which are basically the negative format for the CPU itself. You can do stuff there that's a lot faster. It also, Basic 09 lets you call system calls. So if you want to call any of the calls in the OS to access hard drives, serial ports, all kinds of stuff, that's all built in too. So you can write the program once, and if you have a SCSI drive, or if you have a CoCo SDC or whatever, or DriveWire, it all just works, the same program. You don't have to patch it for every single type. So,
but which is easier?
Mike Rowan says he's getting ready to sign off. Has Mike already left us? I guess Mike has left us. Okay. I was going to ask you.
Basic 09 compiles to a special, interpreted code that's not machine code, and it's not raw tokenized BASIC. It's somewhere in between the two. Yeah. It stores it as a special file type, which is a runtime for the Basic 09 program, which you can then run with.
Yeah, there's a runtime package called RunB that actually has the actual core routines, which is about half the size of the actual Basic 09, because the editor's gone and a few other things too.
Right. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can run it under that. But it doesn't compile to machine code. I'm not aware of a BASIC that I have, at least, that will compile to machine language under Nitrous 9 or OS 9. If there is one, I'd be interested in hearing about it.
Yeah, under Nitrous 9 and OS 9, I do remember somebody was selling one back in the 80s, but I never saw it, and I don't know if it lasted long. And it was a limited compiler. It didn't do the full Basic 09. It wasn't compatible with Basic 09, first of all. It was a complete separate thing. It was integer only, and it only had very limited. I think it was something kind of like along the lines of the Aardvark Tiny compiler. That's the only one I remember seeing, but I don't remember seeing a full-blown one.
Yeah, most of the stuff, if I didn't write it in assembly under OS 9, I ended up writing it in C and using the C compiler.
Yeah. Basic 09 was really good for me because it was fast enough to do prototyping, and it's much quicker to program, at least for me, than to do C. And the interactive editor was kind of nice because you could do very quick changes and run it immediately without having to do a whole recompile.
And actually, I have to agree with Curtis there. Basic 09 was used really for quick development.
Yeah. I mean, at work, we used it for, 15 years?
Wow. Darren Grant chimed in and said, someone in our former Tandy employee Facebook group uses DeskMate on a Tandy 1000EX to store records of caving adventures. So I remember DeskMate well. I never used DeskMate on the CoCo, but I did use DeskMate on my Tandy 1000, both the text version and the graphical version of DeskMate, which was a pretty cool, sweet software package.
Well, overall, they're very, very similar. The Tandy DeskMate for the other Tandy computers and the OS 9 versions of DeskMate. There was a DeskMate and then a DeskMate 3 that was for the CoCo 3 that was an enhanced version of the original.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. I remember having one on my Tandy and you could do word processing. I think there was a spreadsheet, there was a graphics program that you could draw with, and a few other things.
Telecom program and a calendar
it was kind of like the Microsoft Works before there was a Microsoft Works, even just the multi-suite of utility applications.
And if we're going to talk about user interfaces like that, we should probably mention Multiview.
Multiview was a good idea, not implemented all that well. It was way too hard to set up stuff. Like you had to set up AIF files. Well, if you don't know what you're doing and you don't know how those are set up properly, they're a pain in the butt. And they really needed to make it a much more automated process. So once you have it set up, if somebody sets it all up for you, actually it's pretty easy. Double click a game and it runs, no problem.
Yeah,
But,
you have to look at what else was around when that first came out too. I mean,
Yeah.
Windows was in its infancy, if it existed at all at the time.
It did.
And
but,
you want to talk about trying to set something up? You try to set something up to run on Windows, and that at that time frame, it was not easy.
Yeah, because I was about the Windows 2.11 time frame or something, if I remember correctly.
Right, you had to load it, and then only some programs would run because some programs just were not compatible with running under the Windows shell, because they wanted to take over the machine, and this is before the days of the 386s and virtual task registers, etc. So,
yeah. Now, once you set up, it's easy to use, but that initial getting all your new programs set up and making it have files or even drawing the icons for them or whatever, that's the part that's a bit of a pain in the ass.
And what is multi-view? That is what allowed OS 9 to have a graphical windowed mode where you could visually switch between applications. And
it was a graphical shell, basically.
Okay.
Well, hold on. You could switch between applications without multi-view.
Without multi-view, but to like overlap them like Windows, basically.
To overlap them, well, OS 9 Windows and Nitrous 9 Windows do not overlap, even with multi-view, really.
Okay.
But in windowed mode, Windows are actually the windowing mode is actually supported native in the core OS of Nitrous 9 and OS 9. So you can switch between them with the clear key on the native keyboard or the home key under emulation. Okay. So you can have multiple windows and switch between them without using multi-view. Gave you a graphical user interface, though.
Yeah, mouse control basically is what it added.
Yeah.
But it was like Windows 2.11 where you could have multiple programs running on the same screen, but you couldn't overlap them. The level 2 upgrade added that, though it did slow it down a bit, or a lot, depending.
And what's Sockmaster's opinion of the OS 9 environment?
I really couldn't say. I've avoided it since the 80s, and...
Hey, he's my man.
I like bare metal. That's my thing.
Yep.
And it's an abstraction of the hardware from the programmer, so it's about as far from bare metal as you can get.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it is pretty easy. For instance, my SDC utility that I wrote to mount and unmount SDC images from Nitrous 9, I found that the system calls and stats were not that were in Nitrous 9 were not adequate for mounting and unmounting disks. The problem I ran into was if there was not already a disk active on a drive number, that when you tried to mount something there, you couldn't call a system stat on that drive because it would reject it with an error because there's no disk in the drive. So I actually ended up writing directly to the SDC registers in hardware. And it wasn't, it's not too hard to do that. If you want to be compatible with the Nitrous 9 system, though, you have to be careful what you're doing to make sure that you don't upset the rest of the OS. Again, there's also always the option of just having your program take over the system if you're launching something like a game. So,
yeah, my play command did that too. I mean, I would read in up to 2 meg of audio file, using standard OS 9 calls, memory mapping, hard drive access, or whatever you're loading it off of, and then I would just take over the sound chip and basically shut the rest of the system off temporarily to play a WAV file or whatever the heck file you selected.
But that all assumes you've got a OS 9 system or Nitrous 9 system all up and running, configured and working.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. Right now, there's no easy way for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing or doesn't know the hardware intimately. How do you set up a proper boot file that's going to run all the stuff you want to run? Like, do I need VDGint? Well, if you're running certain games, you absolutely do have to have it, and other ones you don't. And certain other games require Windin because they're using a high-level menu handling system, and other games would only require Graphin. And if you add Windin and VDGint, you have enough system RAM to run some other game that has some other custom drivers, etc. So, yeah, it gets to be a bit of a mess.
And therein lies...
I used the giant shoehorn, and I have managed to shoehorn most of the functionality, actually all the functionality you just mentioned, and all the other core functionality you would typically need into a boot that I put that's a hard disk image for the SDC that's available on the CoCo Archive site. And the stuff that I couldn't fit in that was all at once, what I did was I created some files called blah, blah, blah _ mods, where you can say load space. For instance, the system doesn't use DriveWire normally because you're running on a CoCo SDC. But you can type load space DriveWire mods, load space DriveWire _ mods, and then you'll have access to the DriveWire function. And you can actually load this stuff up at runtime, you know. So
as long as you don't try to load too many of those separately, because they take an 8K MMU block for each chunk. So if you try to load several of those mods at once, you will run out of system memory.
Right, which is why I created the mods files also partially, is because what I did there was I merged the device descriptors and the driver and all the other files that were needed for DriveWire, so they all load into just one 8K block. Yeah. So.
But there was a bunch of custom drivers. Like Bill and I used to use SDIS3 and MSF, which is a native MS-DOS file manager. You could actually just do an MS-DOS disk, copy off of it, and everything else just natively, along with your OS9 disks. But that took a whole chunk of system RAM, because that had the SDIS3 driver, which is a couple K. The MSF file manager is another 4.5, 5K to handle all the FAT16 stuff natively. And by the time you did all that, you forget about trying to load in wind and games and stuff too at the same time, because you've blown half of it out. So.
Oh, I think we were left with, 2K a system map after that, Curtis?
Wow. Well, it's users and stuff on our system too, which is not.
So when you loaded this thing in, could you hear it chomping on your memory?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah. Pretty close, Barry.
Alan DeCock was trying to do what he called his level 3, which is where he split the SCF and the RBF into two 16K separate chunks from the regular system RAM, so you could if the system itself would map those in automatically, which helped alleviate that quite drastically. But I think that got broken in the latest Nitrous 9s. It doesn't install anymore. Is that right?
It's actually broken in the version 3.30 now, but I do actually have a working version of Alan's copy of level 3 that does actually work and run. I believe it was last under version 2 point something of Nitrous 9, before they actually started splitting the modules.
Yeah, when they split out the keyboard driver and the joystick driver.
Is that under 6309 or 6809?
It was both. Sorry, it was 6309 only.
Yeah, Nitrous 9 up until version 2.01 at least was exclusively 609, because that was the whole reason for creating it.
Yeah, Darren Grant just mentioned too that unfortunately the lack of standard sets of libraries for hardware access has the downside of making backwards compatibility difficult on potential new CoCo systems. That seems like there's already a challenge on a real CoCo, and now we're looking at different potential new CoCo solutions. Seems like there's a few things that not only do we need the CoCo that's plug and play, but you also maybe need an OS 9 that works,
and that is one of the designs not that hardware.
Yeah, not that it doesn't work, I would say, but
like I said, I've put together a couple images that are pretty much, have the kitchen sink thrown in and other stuff that you can load and unload as needed, which for your basic user is going to be more than sufficient to give them everything they need to run all the stuff they would want to run. But it does have a few issues. I had come up with the idea that you only have really one task running, even in system RAM, at any one point in time. So I always thought, well, why are we keeping all this stuff always mapped into system RAM? Why not, if you need more RAM, why not have it release and unmap some of it so it can map in, for instance, a buffer so it can do the format or whatever. And then unmap it when you're done, and have it unmap and map it.
That's exactly what level 3 that Alan DeCock did.
That sounds like virtual memory.
Yeah, because Alan actually was almost to the point of having full virtual memory, which is where the idea of SCF and RBF being split into two separate tasks.
Yeah, and they had those submaps, so they would be mapped in separately. Like if you were doing an OS or an SCF task, the SCF 16K block and its related drivers descriptors would be mapped into the system RAM. And if you're doing an RBF thing, it would switch over to the RBF part. But that way you actually ended up with, 64 plus 16, 80K, right? Yeah, 80K for system RAM virtually in that case.
Boy, am I glad I don't run OS 9.
Nick said what all non-OS 9 users were thinking.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking of something like not just having two separate maps, but actually saying, okay, well, this is the driver that's currently active, and these are the things that it needs to communicate with. So we need this in the kernel, and we'll just unmap everything else that we're not currently using right now if we need more memory.
The problem there is going to be the hidden speed if you're doing it that way, because then you're reading a disk file to, say, load up a word processor. Well, that's going to be using SCF. The disk driver is using RBF. You're going to be going back and forth between these mapping MMU blocks of willy-nilly constantly, and it drastically slows things down.
Well,
so, I mean, you can do it. You can do it, but it's... What's that?
Who said anything about hitting disk? You could have the stuff loaded into memory somewhere else, and you could just, copy it from wherever it's sitting, from RAM to RAM, and just, and then, so you're not actually hitting disk. Yeah, it would slow down a little bit because you might have to, move it from where it is in memory to somewhere else. But, it wouldn't be taking the hit that you'd be hitting a disk to do it.
Well, no, I'm saying if you're accessing an RBF device as one of your things, like you say, you're loading a disk file or loading a game from disk or whatever, it's not going to spontaneously generate in RAM. Then you're going to be going back and forth. Like if you're swapping in between, as you're saying, like unmapping and mapping in all the time, it would slow things down. So I guess if speed hit's not that critical to you, then yeah.
Well, I'm talking about mapping and unmapping all in memory. You have all these modules loaded, but they don't need to all necessarily sit in system RAM the whole time unless they're being used. So you could put them out in user space where there's lots more.
That's what level 3 does. But the thing is, if say you're mapping your RBF in and now I want to read a disk, that's the reason I'm mapping it in. But that disk is immediately going to be, going into the disk data you're reading is immediately going to be output to the screen, say in a word processor. Well, then I've got to swap in the RBF and read in a sector, and I'm going to swap back the SCF to put it into the word processor. I mean, yes, it's in RAM, not on disk, literally, but it's me swapping these MMU blocks out constantly while you're doing that.
Yeah, unless you determine that, hey, at the beginning of this process, okay, I'm going to be using RBF, I'm going to be using the screen, and, well, okay, I'm not going to be using the serial ports, so let's swap those out.
Yep, the serial ports are part of SCF, so as soon as you bring SCF back...
Yeah. Doesn't sound like there's a simple solution, and I don't think we'll get
we're not going to solve it on this call.
We're not going to solve it on this call, but yeah, this is good stuff.
Well, the biggest thing there,
been
Barry,
solved in the last 30 years, so...
Yeah.
The biggest problem with that, Barry, for really the whole operating system itself is the actual fact that it has to go through all those virtual tables, task switching to each individual task every 60th of a second. So it's actually swapping back and forth to SCF, RBF, SCF, RBF, and all the various others as each task goes through.
Yeah, it's complicated.
So
we can probably get to a less technical topic now, so everybody else doesn't fall asleep.
Yeah, I think
that's fine. It is definitely interesting, though. It's and if there was a so James Ross is asking, did the conversation of FPGAs already happen? We've kind of touched on it, James, but it's probably a good way to segue into that. It's kind of been a hodgepodge of things, but yeah, it seems like there is, to my knowledge now, there's two major CoCo hardware projects, right? There's Glenn Becker's CoCoFPGA, and then there's am I saying the names right? And then there's
Gary Becker.
Gary Becker, and then Glenn.
Roger
Taylor. Okay, yeah, I'm my head's spinning right now from all this.
That other Glenn named Roger Taylor.
Yeah, right. The other Glenn named Roger. So there's Roger Taylor's CoCo on a chip, and there is Glenn Becker's CoCoFPGA. These are two functional hardware platforms that are more or less CoCos. I don't know fully all the differences, and I know that that we'll probably be discussing. Hey, Ed Snyder just joined us. How are you, Ed Zipser? So I guess James is now asking the questions. Have we gotten into that topic? So do we want to go ahead and start talking about that topic right now? What are the different CoCos that exist right now? Right, there's the real CoCo 1 and 2. There's the real CoCo 3. Can't go wrong with those if you can get your hand on them. and they work, right? And with the CoCo 1, 2, and 3, we have CoCo SDC. We've got DriveWire. There's plenty of ways to get software in and out of them. And then you have emulators. So you want to talk about a CoCo community. We have 3 different emulators, right? Just like we've got the mailing list versus Facebook, or not versus, but we have a mailing list and Facebook as 2 ways to communicate. We've got XRoar, we have VCC, and then we have MAME MES as our emulators. Each one has some of its pros and cons to them. They all run software pretty well. Some are more user-friendly than others. So we have emulation as a way to run CoCo software, and then we have new CoCo machines being developed. So what do you guys want to weigh in on all that there?
Let's not also forget about Ed's FPGA Gimme project as well, which is new. It's not a new to CoCo, I suppose.
Yeah, a new Gimme would be pretty sweet.
Yeah, that has a lot. I mean, one of the Gimme's the hardest chip to replace if you blow it up, because there's no manufacturer that you can still buy it from. Unlike, you can still get 609s, you can still get 6809s, etc. So it's great as a replacement chip, but it also allows you to expand the Gimme. We can finally put some stuff that's been missing or kind of hacked on afterwards, or for Nick, the missing 256 color mode, etc. So there's a lot of possibilities that you can expand on that, and I wish Ed would join the call, because he can probably give us some more technical detail on what's possible.
Yeah, is Ed in our Facebook? Is Ed in our Skype group? I'm not even sure if he is.
I don't know if he is. He's on the YouTube chat, I think, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah, he's in the YouTube chat. Ed, do you want to join us on Skype?
That'd be great if you would. That would give us a
right from the horse's mouth. We won't have to make up stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have Gary Becker's FPGA project myself, and to be honest, I've only used it a couple times because I still prefer using the real CoCo. So,
yep,
I think Nick's under the same thing, mainly in Nick's case, because there's no joystick support yet on Rogers.
I've got Gary's FPGA, and it does support joysticks, but yeah, I'm with David. So I prefer using the real thing still.
Now, not to get slightly off the FPGA project, but going to like the DriveWire stuff and with the CoCo SDC, I have to say Darren's patches for Disk Basic for the SDC DOS, I like how he did that for controlling DriveWire. I actually prefer that over HDB DOS now.
Yeah, it is pretty sweet. I've got to drop off of here, but I just wanted to mention something I'm working on before I go. Just really quick. You guys, I'm sure, are all familiar with the CoCo Flash. I just developed a little utility I'll be testing later this evening that converts ROM files from raw ROM format to a bin file that can be used easily with the CoCo Flash.
That's cool.
So, cool.
That'll be handy.
So I called it CONV to bin, and I've got it pretty much working, and I'm going to be test burning a file later this evening with it. And I expect it to work because I already checked the output of it and everything. So that should make it easier to get stuff onto the CoCo Flash cartridge. And with that, I'm going to go. You guys.
All right, Barry. Thanks for being here.
Yep,
Appreciate
thanks
it.
for dropping by.
Yeah, later, Barry.
All right, there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Barry Nelson, the pioneer from the Wild West, too, it looks like from his photo. So, back in the early days of OS 9 in the 1800s, Barry was working on it. So, Sockmaster says the Gimme is quite easy for software development. Darren Grant is saying that the Motorola 6809s can still be made to order. Big West Purdue is saying the Gimme had a reputation as being powerful but kind of hard to develop for, right? But no, Sockmaster says no, it's not hard to develop for. So that's cool. Very, very cool. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I've mentioned this in some of my videos when I started playing CoCo 3 games. I had no idea what the CoCo 3 was capable of because I kind of... I transitioned because CoCo 3 and Tandy 1000, I was working at Radio Shack at the time, and I got my CoCo 3 and Tandy 1000 right around the same time. I kind of switched over to Tandy because it had slightly better games for obvious reasons. It's better hardware, better music. And I didn't really appreciate the CoCo 3 for what it was at the time. And I'm playing some of these games and the hardware scrolling and the background music and the things people are doing with that gimme chip, absolutely amazing. So it is a neat little machine that I'm only just now recently beginning to appreciate. One of the challenges I had with a gimme, and it's kind of my problem, not everybody's problem, but I also have this prototype board that Ed sent me that allows me to output my CoCo 3 from RGB to S-video so I can get a live capture to make my videos on there. And that one only worked on the 87 version of the gimme, not the 86. There's two different versions of the gimme. And, and also the gimme is a custom chip that was designed by Tandy for that computer. It's not available on the open market like all the other chips are. So the fact that Ed's working on this, which he just chimed in right now, Ed said, okay, yeah, we'll be adding some stuff to the gimme. There's a lot of FPGA capacity, and that we will be left with after the normal gimme functionality is covered. So I guess once we get the normal capabilities there's room to add stuff to it. The missing SGS modes come to mind as something that could be fixed. So yeah, it seems like once, and I think he mentioned on Facebook too that the first round of this gimme is going to be a straight up gimme. It's just going to do that. But I believe, did it also have VGA output? Is that one of the main benefits too? Is not only is it a replacement, but it has stock VGA capabilities?
That's what I heard. Yep.
Yeah. So that'll be nice. And new functionality is great. Like when you have the FPGA and the CoCo on a chip, it's nice that there's new things you can do, but then the question becomes, is it standardized, and who or what is going to develop for these new features? And I don't know, like right now, John Linville is working on new sound hardware. He's going to be writing the games to use the chip and including the chip on his games. So he'll be one person. But as these new things become available, as great as these features are, how do we exploit them, and how do we get this functionality to the hands of people like me who are not going to be able to write software for it? Somebody else has got to write the software.
Well, that's exactly it, Steve. With all of the projects, not just Ed's gimme replacement, it's with Gary's and Roger's FPGA too. They all have extra features embedded into them that who's going to actually program to use them.
Yeah, and we need to try to standardize between all those projects as much as possible so that it's worth somebody's time to implement some of these new features. Because if you have like an extra graphics thing over here that's not compatible with the one over here, and it doesn't even show up on the third one, well, who's going to bother trying?
Right. Yeah, and Ed Snyder did confirm yes VGA, so I'm assuming that means VGA output is standard from that. It will have both 15.7 kilohertz RGB and VGA to maintain compatibility with programs that use H-Sync interrupt. Okay. Hopefully you guys know what that means. I guess it has something to do with synchronizing to displays. New hardware is a great thing to have, and then just taking advantage of it. I think I had asked this question in the past. It would be nice for somebody to clone the speech sound pack, and then somebody mentioned, well, who's going to develop for it? And at that time, my only concern wasn't anything new. I would just like to have this to play the old stuff. Now, Curtis and Nick and I have determined that there's maybe 2 games that actually use music for the bloody thing. So at the end of the day, it's probably not worth it. But I just thought, since they're so hard to find and they're expensive, if you find a speech sound card on eBay, it's usually about $100 because they are rare. Not everybody can have it. I was lucky to grab one. Some people might still want one, but there is not there's replacements for a lot of things, but there's not a replacement for that. Is that worth replacing? Probably not. The more I've learned, that is probably not worth replacing. But so now we have a new sound chip. How do we address taking advantage of that?
Okay, well, on the sound speech pack, it turns out they're kind of crap.
There's no kinda about it.
I was complaining for a while, and I kind of thought he was whining about it until I got a little deeper into it myself. And yeah, it turns out they're really slow. Anyway, we'll leave that to the side. You pointed out on the music chip that I'm working with, I'm intending to put them right on game cartridges. And when you buy the game cartridge, you'll have the game that uses the hardware there it is. And if for some reason we decide we want to use different hardware, we'll build different cartridges.
Yeah,
with
you're not locked into it.
Yeah. So no, it's a downside, right? Some people would like to say, well, I just want to buy the chip once or whatever. Well, in this case, the chip only costs like $1. And actually, the chip only costs about 60 cents.
You get shipping.
And that's actually with shipping.
Oh, wow.
And so they're pretty cheap. Now, it is a little more expensive once you factor in a couple of other pieces you need. But still, you're talking about adding just a couple of dollars cost to a cartridge. So as long as you're willing to buy the cartridge, there you go. Have the hardware. Price sensitivity on CoCo cartridges doesn't seem to be too sensitive, considering just sold a Farfall cartridge on eBay a few weeks back for over $100.
That's impressive.
Yeah. One just before that for $70. So, and that's after I tell everybody, buy them at CoCoFEST, I'll sell you for $40.
Right.
So, anyway, so it is just a matter of getting some development going, and for people to use that sound chip. I know John Strong's expressed some interest in using the sound chip. We kind of have a difference of opinion on the hardware right now, or at least we're using different hardware, but we'll see how that turns out.
Hey, John, if I may speak up, we just was doing demo hardware so we could listen to it. I'm waiting on your hardware.
Okay, good news.
Okay, that's been that. The stuff sent to Alan was so he could hear the sound out of the chip, and he's playing with some things with that. But as far as the game cartridge, at this point in time, I'm waiting on what the work you're doing, and because I think it's a great chip to go in a cartridge. I mean, there's other options out there, and we may explore those. But I think that's a great option for the game cartridge. Cool. And I appreciate the work you're doing, because if you weren't doing it, I would have to be doing it. so I'd be lazy or efficient, whichever way you want to put it, and waiting on what you're doing.
So cool. So one other point that's out there, and I was exploring this a little bit privately, and was probably going to mention it in my talk at CoCoFest, but maybe I'll let the cat out of the bag a little bit. It's not actually a secret by any means, but this chip, of course, is the same chip that was used for audio in the Tandy 1000 line. So those of you who are kind of computer historians or whatever may be aware of the Sierra games and the relation to the Tandy 1000 line, and having music in the Sierra games that were specific for the Tandy 1000. Well, a little research will show, if you want to, the format that these games used was called AGI for graphics. I don't know. It was
Adventure Game Interpreter.
There you go. So there's a standardized format there. Well, that format contains that audio information in it, and it's basically the format itself is actually basically inspired by this chip. That being said, so we've got AGI interpreters for the CoCo. I haven't gotten to the point of actually looking at the data files we're using for playing AGI games on the CoCo, but I have to assume that they're basically the same data files that you use on the PC or whatever. So hopefully that means that the data files actually are carrying the sound audio, the audio information that we need for playing the audio on the chip. And so theoretically, somebody's got to bust their butt to do the work. But theoretically, if you get into that Sierra AGI interpreter and adds a little intelligence to take out the Tandy sound info instead of just the PC sound info, which literally the PC sound info was really just one channel of the Tandy sound info. But if you take that out and put it to the TI chip, we ought to be able to play the Sierra games on the color computer with the Tandy 1000 sound.
That's a game changer.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that's like way pre-announcement. It's just a sort of possibility. Nobody's actually done any work to make it happen yet. But
wow.
Hopefully,
Mr. Major should help you with that. The one who ported all the other AGI games to the CoCo, because obviously he's done some research on that format too. So
send him a cartridge.
Yeah, cool to see how that turns out. But so we'll see. That's on the it's on the whiteboard on the back room at least.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I think we've discussed this. I don't remember if you answered the question specifically, John Linville, but I think the answer, it might be obvious, but you're going to develop a hardware chip, and it's going to be on your cartridge. Let's just say somebody purchased your cartridge, had it in a multi-pack. Could somebody else write a game to use that same hardware based on your cartridge, and that way it's got a multi-purpose thing to it?
Maybe.
Okay. Okay.
The part of what makes it simple and cheap to put it on a cartridge is that I'm using the spare chip select to select the audio chip. So that means it's going to be at FF40, which of course is where the disc controller is. And so if you want to plug the MPI. As long as you don't have another disc controller in there, then you'll probably be okay. But that's going to limit you to like a drive wire only kind of system.
I see. Okay.
So, now does that mean we could? It doesn't mean we couldn't produce another card with the addressing done differently. But I at this point, I was trying to avoid arguing about which address is free to use and how somebody's going to that oddball voice synthesis pack from 1984 uses that thing, and how dare I, reuse it. I kind of wanted to avoid those arguments.
Sure.
And so like you said, it's possible. Like I said, the Sierra game option is the biggest thing that might lead me to produce a card that's separately addressed. Of course, somebody else could do it too, right?
Right.
Somebody would just have to do the hardware and figure out, how to construct it. There's a little bit of a trick to it to make the hardware actually work, actually. But
okay.
Anyway, that's out there. It's in the wind. It could be possible.
That's cool. That would be exciting.
It just hadn't got there yet.
And there's a lot of possibility with the sounds and stuff. And I've got Zipser's board here to play with, but the personal choice that I came up with probably for the same reasons that John Linville was cost and size, and somebody else may change that equation for us, but I'm planning on doing a game based on his card. That's what I'm planning on at this time, and.
When you say his, are you talking about Zipster's or John Linville's?
John Linville's.
Okay.
And in fact, I talked to him, and I was going to actually add some stuff he hadn't talked about, and he's already doing that. And I was like, oh, cool. I don't have to go there. I can just, worry about the game instead of the hardware. And
yeah. I think what John is hinting at there is it's a bank switch card. So it should be able to handle up to, present incarnation, up to 64K of game code and data.
And I'm just trying to be careful and not make anything public that's not public. Okay? And as sometimes I'm shared information, and I'm not sure it's for public consumption yet, so I keep my mouth shut on it.
That's cool stuff. It's just so cool to know that there's so much hardware stuff going on right now. It just blows my mind. The quality of everything too. It's just it's mind-boggling how many things are going on. One example is last year I ordered, and I haven't even used it yet. I ordered the MCX 128 add-on for the MC10. And I bought the 3D printed case last year at CoCoFEST, which I haven't even unshrink wrapped yet. And in less than a few months, there's already a newer, better version of that MC10 board that added sound and joystick controllers and everything else. So the good news is there's a lot of hardware and more hardware coming. I think the challenge is going to become some standardization and some adaptation to it to get people to develop stuff for it. And what makes the most sense? When you have many choices, how do you choose one?
Well, fortunately, even the two chips that we're talking about in the different machines, they are similar enough to make it easy to write for both. Yeah, it's going to be a separate version, a little different, but they're close enough in features that if you use a common set of features, you could actually write something, and with minor changes for it to run on the other chipset. Mm-hmm. And so that's really a cool item with those two chipsets that are being looked at. And of course, that's the AY series or with the Yamaha clone and the TI series. But both very interesting sound chips, a lot of samples out there on the web. Mm-hmm. And back to the sound speech pack real quick, and I need to get back to doing some coding here that I'm working on, is I kind of avoided that because the reputation is very hard to work with. And it's something that Steve York made quite known back in the Rainbow Fest days, that the sound speech cartridge, yes, you could do things with it, but it was a pain in the neck. Okay. And cost factor. Okay. Yeah. We talked about this last week on cost factor. That's something that really came down in price. Mm-hmm. And I think between myself and my brother, we usually had duplicates of everything, and I think it's the one thing we really didn't have a duplicate. We only had one South Speech cartridge. Right. Because of the cost.
I think this might be worth repeating again, because I've heard people mention in interviews, people have said things like when they developed games in the 80s, I would have loved to have possibly written for the speech sound pack, but there was the cost of the cartridge, which was $100 retail. There's the cost of the multi-pack interface, which I don't even remember what that sold for retail back then. So it was cost prohibitive from somebody who's working out of their house, which is what most CoCo devs were then and now. So if there are people who are going to sell hardware that, what's going to sell the hardware is going to be the software. So if maybe somebody's got the sound card that they want to sell, it might be good for them to give some either discounted or free copies to a couple of current game devs to do stuff for them. I'm sure it's probably affordable now anyways, but get it in the hands of the developers. Don't make that being an obstacle, because I think the software is going to sell the hardware.
The sound and speech cartridge also didn't work on a CoCo 3 without modification.
At double speed, yeah. You could slow it down and leave it single speed, but who wants to do that?
Who wants to do that?
Seems like the planet was aligned against that ill-fated card. What a shame.
Let me address what you just have said, okay? And this is one of the reasons why we have a little bit of different hardware that we're playing with right now, waiting on John. But I've got stuff over to Alan, which is a musician. I'm not a musician, which I made clear last week, to help get this software. I also have, sound cards with the AY or the Yamaha series chips in it for a test, for development, to turn things on, as like John Linville likes to say. And I think that's it. I mean, there's a lot of hardware ideas. Like I have joysticks and stuff, ideas and stuff I haven't released because I haven't had time to do the software to turn it on to make it useful for people. And that's going to be the key in this market. We get a lot of excited people that's willing to do things, but we need to turn this stuff on. And I think this is something that I've heard John Linville want to call it preach, and I totally agree with him. We need to have it turned on to make it cool to use. Because we get it out there and we can't support it in software, then it's not much use to the average person.
Right. I think at this point, most of the new hardware is also being developed by the people who are also writing software for it too. But and nowadays most of it's affordable, a lot more affordable than it was back then too. It'd just be good to make sure that if there are people who are willing to write the games, that there's no barriers to let them support all these great new hardware devices that are out there. I think it's a self-fulfilling market there. What Big West Purdue is saying, it would be cool if someone could figure out how to use the Roland MT32 external module for the CoCo stuff. That you probably can through MIDI, right? CoCo can support MIDI, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know Brian Schubing is doing all kinds of MIDI stuff at CoCoFEST.
Yeah, you can do software MIDI through the Bitbanger, because you can control the speed to the 31.25 kilohertz that MIDI needs. And there was also several hardware MIDI packs that would let you do reading in and writing out to MIDI, etc. So,
but would that be something that could be used as like background music for a game, or would that be too CPU intensive to multitask that streaming?
How many people have a Roland MT32?
exactly.
That's actually one of the big users of MIDI on a CoCo is Bill Pierce.
Yeah.
Well, there's one user.
And Brian Shubing. Yeah.
Well, he uses the CoCo 3 for doing a lot of his production work in the studio.
Yeah, that's neat.
The Roland box is kind of a different issue, but there's actually chips out there now at about a cost of about $5 that support MIDI. That could be put on a board, okay? And in fact, I believe there is a system under development right now that is going to support one of those chips. And so that's something that may...
Or just use drive-wire MIDI and then have something that picks up the MIDI signals on the PC and play it through the PC. So everyone has got access to that, and it's only a wire for drive-wire.
Yeah, there's those options, okay? We do have the new MIDI packs and so on. And so it's just how many people is going to use it. And as you say, dry wire would probably be the more common, most use it. More people would have that than the other.
Well, the MIDI cartridge, you've got to have the MIDI cartridge, you've got to have a multi-pack, and you've got to have a MIDI device.
Then you're back to the sound speech pack and multi-pack.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So scrub.
Not always practical, right?
If Tandy had only put in a decent sound chip into the computer in the first place.
Yep.
Jason did a nice job on the new MIDI card. I wish he would have stuck a place for a ROM on it, but that's me as a game programmer, not hardware designer.
But you still need a MIDI device.
That's the one.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, David.
No, I was going to say, in some hardware designs, how hard would it be to make maybe a hardware item if you don't want to do a multi-pack for like a pass-through card? So that way you could just plug like the floppy controller into a pass-through card and then into the CoCo.
Kind of like a built-in Y cable with full address decoding.
Well, that's Ed's multi-pack.
Smart ass.
Yeah. It seems like that doesn't become cost effective. I think we asked John Strong about that before. It just doesn't seem like it makes sense. It's certain things are just easier to put onto the cartridge with the EEPROMs and try to invent new wheels. I mean, that definitely sounds like a good idea. I think one of the things who did this? I'm trying to remember of a game console that did this. I think it was like Sonic and Sonic 2. And I believe the Sonic 2 cartridge, you could piggyback to Sonic 1 and play those levels because it would read in the level data and let you like replay the Sonic 1 game with the new characters from Sonic 2 or something. That was kind of a neat implementation in the 90s. That's the only one that comes to mind right now.
Having the sound chip within the game cartridge, if you release games on cartridge, that's probably the best idea, as John Linville's doing.
Yeah. And John Strong as well.
Especially since the chips are so cheap, you can just have the sound chip.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that I guess are just not easy solutions to. But the good news is when John and John are making their games will support the music they're providing with the cartridge, and it doesn't seem to affect the cost of the cartridge bill of materials that much. And we've already established that there's no shortage of people willing to buy the cartridge. It seems like there's a renewed interest in cartridges, with new cartridges. And somebody had asked earlier in the chat, are there new cartridges being available for the color computer? And I believe I answered that person in chat. But yeah, and basically the main people who are doing them are right now in the call, right? So John Strong's doing it. John Linville is doing it. Nick Marentis is doing it as a disk image, but he's also developing new software. I'll just do a quick showing off of Nick's game here, Popstar Pilot, that I'll have available at CoCoFEST. Shameless plug. But yeah, so new cartridges are being developed. There were 4 last year. How many did you have, John Linville? Did you have 3 or 4? I've got 3 of them myself. I've got Christmas Rush, Follow CoCo, and Farfall.
Yeah, I want to say there was another one, but I can't think of it right now. I've had other games in progress. We're going to have
Yeah.
another one here that's written by Evan Wright,
Mm-hmm.
right name. That's called Flood It. We're going to have about a dozen copies of that available. And,
Hopefully there'll still be one when I get there.
Can we reserve now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, just got those right now. It's always just a matter of what do people want. I've produced a few for the past couple of years, and most of them are cartridge ready, whether or not they've been available on it. I've been trying to encourage lots of people. Anytime I find somebody who's got a game in progress, I'm trying to encourage them. Say, hey, if you want it on a cartridge, we'll work together on it. We'll get it out there. Some have better reasons than others, or some kind of just say, okay, well, I'll think about it and don't come back or whatever. Some of them, I think, are still working on it, but maybe they just aren't ready. The game's not quite ready or whatever. We've got the basic ROM technology ready now. If you don't need anything too special, and then we'll have Switch cartridge available soon, and with the audio hardware, and let's see if we can fill that one up before I develop too much more. But
right,
I think we're all waiting for your sound chip version.
Yeah, we also have the injected molded cartridges, which are just wonderful to look at, and they're shiny and pretty. So we have the physical packaging. We have Tim Lindner's box reproductions now too. Are those still available? I think Tim's on the list to be at CoCoFEST this year.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I imagine he probably still has some of the total reproduction, gray box ones. I have no idea, but I imagine Mr. Strong still has a number of his boxes. I have a number of my boxes available.
Mm-hmm.
They're physically pretty much the same, but different colors and prints and whatever.
Yes, when we talked to him last year about possibly ordering more, he said yes, he had quite a bit of overrun.
Okay.
And in fact, they did an overrun on me that I would have to sell a lot of cartridges to take care of his overrun. And so, to give you how important I think this sound chip on the cartridge is I had a game that I could have had available on cartridge this year, and I put it on hold. Okay, so we could have the sound on the card, and I think it's that important.
Yeah. You're postponing bringing a game to Fest to sell because you want the game to have music. So you want the full package, which at the end of the day, we're going to benefit from that because we're going to have a better game, a better game with more features.
Yeah,
go ahead.
This cartridge is a combination of both the music and or audio and the bank switching. You could do a cheaper cartridge with no bank switching, or you could do a cheaper cartridge with no audio. It just kind of depends who shows up with what ideas. What do you really need?
Yeah.
And for that matter, we could do bank switching to a bigger size as well. It just require a little bit. It'll require a little bit different work on the PCB layout. It's not a huge amount of work. It's just it's something different. And my thought is let's see if we can fill this one up before we go off and design the next one. But if somebody's got what's that?
I'm sorry, John. I got a question for you regarding the ROM. Is it going to be programmable, or is it going to be something we have to send a hex file to you, or that makes it hard to debug? How do you? Is it going to be an electrically erasable ROM chip or anything like that?
You mean if you want to be the author of a cartridge?
Yeah.
Or, well, I mean, it can work out however you want. We're certainly EEPROM compatible. For the cartridges I've been building, I'm using one-time programmable EEPROMs because they're way cheaper. But if you were the author of a game, we certainly could get you a cartridge with an EEPROM in it. I don't have anything with flash right now, but that would be something possible in the future. There's a lot of possibilities. We might even could use the Jim Brain, Barry Nelson flash cart for prototyping, and then move to something else once you got the game farther along.
But many of us already have a multi-cartridge ROM, or sort of ROM-RAM cartridge for all the games. It's called the CoCo SDC. You just dump any game, disc, cartridge ones that have been cracked already, put them on the disc, and there it is. One cartridge does all, plus a hard drive, plus everything else, all on one cartridge.
Yeah.
No sound chip, though.
Bosco,
no, that's the problem, the sound chip.
Bosco asked a question. This is Steve Bamford, who made Flag and Bird. He was asking if he has self-modifying code and it's put on a ROM chip, could that be sent to run in RAM where it can still modify itself?
Probably. That's kind of a technical detail. Steve is pretty much the person I was talking to when I was talking about reaching out.
Okay.
So I'd love to hear more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you can play games like that. We've got something kind of chalkboarded up. I don't know if we've actually pulled it off yet, but I think it'll work. Where if you have something you've written in BASIC and you want to put it on ROM, I think we have a mechanism that'll work for that.
Wow.
So, if you're interested in having a cartridge for your game, and when I say we, I'm talking about the triumvirate of cartridge producers, or for the plastic cartridge ones. And we're looking for ways to sell the cases because
sure,
because we've got a bunch of them.
do you have some estimates on how many cartridges you've sold to date on your various games, like some numbers? So if somebody's wanting to develop something, what can they expect to sell, cartridge wise?
I was trying to think of this earlier. I haven't actually done an inventory. I personally have not sold that many cases outside of the ones that I've wrapped in, around games.
Right.
And I think I'm in the 50 or 60 cases down at this point. That's just sort of where I'm at a point where, I'm manufacturing them at a rate that I'm comfortable with. Because after a while it gets a little boring soldering stuff together, if you're hoping just to buy a car or anything, well, you're probably going to be disappointed. If you have a solid game, I think you could probably sell. A few dozen is probably reasonable for a good game. But we're going to see here. Coming up, we're going to see how Evan's game sells, and Farfall, of course, is the one I know the most about, but it's a little hard to tell because I've marketed in Farfall for like 4 years, and so to the point where I think everybody would be tired of hearing about Farfall. But it makes it a little bit different than just showing up with a new game because people have heard about it, and people have read the blog, and people have seen the struggle or whatever. They feel that they're part of that. Whereas you show up with a new game, you might get that, you might not. But anyway, like I said, I'll be surprised when one sells more than 100. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I think the whole blog thing actually is a good marketing tool too, because Nick did that as well with Popstar, and I think his sales are quite good as well. It's a disc-based game, but I think just spontaneously springing a cartridge on people doesn't quite sell as well, at least from what I've gathered from talking to both of you.
The promotion through the podcast and through Steve did help the sales of Bomb Squad, and they around 20, 21, 22, all around the time of CoCoFEST. last year. I'll have 15 more at
Okay,
the fest this year available.
More bomb squads available if you missed out.
Yeah,
Very
about
cool.
15, yeah.
That's cool. That's cool.
So I don't know how many of those will sell. They'll give us some kind of idea what the market is a little bit more.
I think we had the discussion that I think it was you, John Strong, that when it's on cartridge, it seemed to spark more interest in sales because it was a cartridge versus being on a disc or disc image. I think there's something very retro about it being on the cartridge, and there's very tangible and collectible about that as well. You know.
And I think that's true because, I'm looking at, Bomb Squad. I'm saying, okay, this is a game you can basically play on your PC for free. Yet people are buying it on the cartridge for the color computer.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I've got a little bit of variation to it, but still, you can play it for free on a PC.
So maybe, at least in my case, I've from both you and John Linville, I bought 2 copies of some of your games because I wanted to keep one sealed in the package and I wanted one I could pop in my CoCo. So that, if somebody's a true collector and a diehard and just a, nut job like me, they might buy more than one copy too. So that may or may not help. But I definitely think the packaging of what you guys did last year at the CoCoFEST was absolutely top notch. The whole the being in a box, being shrink wrapped, having a label, having a cartridge, it's like going to Radio Shack. It was it's the next best thing to going into Radio Shack and buying a cartridge is going to CoCoFEST and buying a cartridge. But yeah, so cartridges are being made, and the quality of these cartridges is top notch. The quality of the packaging is top notch. The games themselves are top notch CoCo games. So yeah, it's a great time to buy CoCo games, and a great place to get them this year would be at CoCoFEST, April 22nd and 23rd in Lombard, Illinois.
and the packaging, I think the packaging really does, as well as blogging and kind of letting people know ahead of time, like the struggle, as John Linville put it. But the packaging, I think, really helps sells it too, because Nick did very professional packaging for his. Not it wasn't just a floppy in a Ziploc bag type thing, and he's had pretty good sales too. So I think that makes a big difference.
This is how we do floppy in a Ziploc in Australia here. This is packaging done right. No worries. Would you like some fries with that, mate?
Because what we're selling now is the whole experience.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is why I did some posters. I had T-shirts that were there. Mouse pads. But it's kind of experience that we're selling, and doing the talks, with CoCo Talk, with your YouTube and the CoCo crew, it's communicating and bringing people into the experience of the game, and so you buy it for the experience as well as all of that. I think that all helps.
Yeah.
And and thank you, Stevie, and thank you, CoCo crew, for everything that you've done to help promote this and help us
no worries.
Continue this. And I like Simon's term, CoCo Nation.
CoCo Nation, I like that. Hashtag CoCo Nation. We need to start trending that right now. Hashtag CoCo Nation.
Actually, go ahead.
All right. Well, I'll take it. Well, one thing, when I think Frank Pittle had the comment about CoCoFest becoming a family reunion or whatever, and it's fine, and it's nice that it's been like that over the years. But I think I think that attitude actually partly was contributing to it dying over time. It's kind of like, well, it's a family reunion, but it was mostly driven by the great aunts and the great uncles. And there were no cousins and nieces and nephews showing up.
No new blood.
And, the past few years, I've done a lot of promotion, and thankfully, eventually got a few other people excited enough. I got Stevie in to do some promotion, and invigorate the Facebook group and all that sort of stuff. We've been getting, more new people there, more people that are interested in some other stuff. It's not just come in and see the same old people and make sure we're not dead yet. Come in and see who's done a new project this year and who's working on something new and who's produced something more fun for us to do on the CoCo this year. So I think bringing that excitement in is what keeps it a living hobby, as opposed to some boring old thing Dad did before he retired, or whatever, or after he retired.
Yeah. That is so funny. Put a mirror under him, see if he's still alive.
That reminds me of a statement some automobile writer says about Buick. It says the average age owner of a Buick was dead.
My God.
And you might not be able to tell it because I kind of let loose and you feel free to talk, but I'm really not real comfortable at times promoting myself. And so you guys made an avenue that I could step in and not feel uncomfortable and to be able to promote the products. And that's a great help.
No, I'm grateful that there are products to promote.
Yeah.
I'm all in favor of that. That's part of being a member of a community, right? Doing it, whatever we can do to help out is, I can't make the hardware, but at least I can support it and buy it and help promote it.
Yeah. Actually, kind of along that line, a question I have for John Kowalski. Like all the stuff you've done has basically been either freeware or maybe even shareware on occasion, but basically, stuff like Donkey Kong, you have no choice because of copyrights. But have you considered now that there is a bit of a renaissance of actually doing a completed product that we can actually pay you for? Because, quite honestly, I think a lot of us would like to give you some money for all the stuff you've done over the years.
I vaguely considered it. But it might be cool. Now that this cartridge stuff is seemingly everyone has the idea that cartridges would be a good way to go as well. Not too many people have disk drives anymore. Maybe I could do something on a cartridge at some point. That would be cool.
Because I would love to be able to support you in a way that's official. Like if you made something new, and then we can actually pay for the actual product. Because most stuff you released, all the fantastic things you've done, I can't recall a single one you've ever charged for.
I've pretty much given away everything except my terminal program, which I made shareware. But everything else was just giveaway.
Yeah. Obviously, I think you're making some money on the remix boards and stuff, or are you pretty well selling those at cost?
I'm making some money on that.
Okay. But I think the CoCo community would really like to add some support for you too. So.
Yeah, we brought that topic up when we were talking to Chris Latham and a few other people. If what you guys who are doing blogs now, do you have like a PayPal link on your blogs or anything else like that where people can contribute if they want to? I don't think it hurts to ask, and then for people who want to, I think they would just throw you a couple bucks to help support the project as it's happening, or throw you something as a thank you for things you've done in the past. I think there's a lot of modesty here in this community, and even in this chat room. There's some people who've done some amazing things that are very modest about it, but I don't think it's a terrible thing just to have a PayPal link on your site saying, if you'd like to contribute, send whatever you want.
Well, that's probably true. Although, on the other hand, there's a few out there that I've gotten some hate mail from time to time for daring to charge money for my cartridges.
You charlatan.
Well, you weren't going to make that sale anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Definitely. I didn't ship many off to any Bernie rallies, so that's for sure.
Alexander Wallace has joined us. Hello, Alexander. Alexander also has been chiming in on the messages and the mailing list and everything else too. Yeah.
And I like to say, I've had a couple people who send me for extra money on a case, and I said, okay, you sent me more money. I want to make sure that's right. Oh no, I intend to.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I accept the tip, but want to make sure that was on
Yeah,
purpose,
right.
so that I won't
Yeah.
overcharge you.
On the subject of software on diskettes and plastic bags, I think if you check eBay right now and see what Sundog is doing, Glenn Dahlgren, I think people are interested in buying those too. So
Yeah, I noticed he put that on Facebook too. So that's pretty cool. So he's got some basically, what do they call that, new original stock or something? There's a term for that when they haven't been sold and they resurface.
New old stock.
New old stock, something like that. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I bought most of those off him originally back at Rainbow Fest, so I already have pretty well the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know what they're going for on eBay, but I couldn't afford to get into a bidding contest with anybody right now. So, new old stock, yes.
I think most of them buy it now in $60 to $70.
Wow, that's I'd love to have them. That's a little too rich for my blood. Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned something in Facebook, and I don't know if anybody was not clear on this, but one of the things I was hoping to do, which I'm not going to be able to do, is I wanted to have T-shirts that I could bring with me to CoCoFest. I wanted to have Popstar Pilot T-shirts and a couple of these I'm a Coconut T-shirts, but when I started looking into how much it was going to cost me to have these produced, I searched a lot of places. It was going to cost me an average of about $15 per shirt. And for me even to bring 10 shirts or 20 shirts, that's like, $150, $300, whatever it is. I just don't have the money to do that right now. So I wanted to bring T-shirts, so everybody could, I could have them on a table. There'd be some buzz and stuff. People would want to buy a shirt as an impulse buy, but I can't afford to. So, it is with regrets that I am not going to be able to bring a stack of T-shirts. I'm going to bring a few. Like I've ordered a few for myself. So I've ordered a Popstar T-shirt. I've ordered we've got 2 different coconut T-shirts. I've ordered a couple mugs, so I'll have one of each design on display so everybody can see what they looks like. But they're all available online. So if anybody really wants a shirt, they could just buy it online. And I really can't get it any cheaper. I tried, but I just thought it'd be cool to have a stack of T-shirts there. But I'm just, I'm not making, I'm not making Curtis Boyle kind of money here, so I just can't do this right now. So.
Tens of 20s of cents.
So that's unfortunate. I did look around. It's not cheap, man. It's not cheap getting a shirt made.
Or shipping it.
Yeah, the shipping's not bad, but $15 a shirt for wholesale, it limits my quantities I can afford to buy out of pocket.
Even just I make my shirts when I do some because I have a heat press and such.
Yeah.
And they're not quite as nice as the silkscreen stuff, but still pretty nice.
Yeah.
But the cost of T-shirts has gone up quite a bit, even just for the wholesale on the T-shirts. It's hard to find, a good price on those now even. So.
Somebody was asking what the turnout was at CoCoFest, and I think Jim Brain answered we had about 80 people last year. I think we're probably on target to have that many this year as well. Hopefully more. John Linville, do you know what the estimated turnout's going to be for Tandy Assembly yet, or is it too soon to tell?
Yeah, it's way too soon there. I think we have an interest page on Facebook that, with 15 or 20 people saying they're coming, or whatever, but it's, it's 6 months out, so who knows?
Yeah. Do you know if Darren Grant has mentioned if he'd be able to make it or not, since you've given him enough advance notice?
Well, he kindly expressed some interest. I don't know if that was just British politeness or what.
Yeah.
I hope he'll show up. I think he seems like a cool guy. I just like to have him. But that would be cool. We do have we have confirmed keynoters. I'm drawing a blank now.
Okay.
Don French and Scott Adams, the adventure guy.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
And so they're a little heavy on the gray TRS-80 side.
That's fine.
I think they're pretty good headliners either way.
Oh, no doubt.
To recruit enough CoCo participation. Ideally this was kind of set up as an alternative to CoCoFest or an add-on to CoCoFest. To get us halfway through the year, and then it kind of dawned on us to bring the Z80 folks to kind of augment the numbers. So I'd like for the event not to lose its CoCo side in the process,
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully we'll have some CoCo folks that either can't make it to CoCoFest or that are looking for a second event halfway through the year. That'll help them show up, and I think it'd be cool. I mean, it's Chillicothe, Ohio. It's kind of the middle of nowhere if you're not from there, but it seems like a nice place. And it's just kind of a nice Midwestern town, and I don't know, it just seemed like a cool place. I stopped there on the way to CoCoFest when I'm driving, and there's enough amenities for restaurants and hotels and that sort of stuff. I think people will be pleased in terms of being able to get a bite of whatever they like to eat and that sort of thing. But yeah, we've gotten pretty good participation. We're cooperating with the TRS-80 Trash Talk podcast folks, and that of course includes Randy Kindig and Peter
Sure.
Steen. And so Randy's had real good contact. So getting us in contact with Don French and
That's awesome.
And
Have you ever tried to get a hold of Roger Schrag, who did the Adventure International ports for the CoCo? Because if you can get both of them there, that would be really awesome.
No, didn't even know the name, but that's something to look for.
Yeah, he's the guy who did the EdTasm Plus patches and Rainbow for disc and stuff, the original cartridge version.
Okay, cool.
But he did a lot of program for Adventure International. He did, I think, all their adventure game ports, and then he did some of the arcade game ports as well.
All right. Well, we should look for him then. CoCo it up a bit.
Darren Grant has responded. He says, I will try to make it, especially if the joystick adapter is ready. You got to get your free Canadian labor cracking. You got to crack the whip.
so, Darren's working on a USB adapter for the old CoCo joysticks for people that want to do emulators.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the other one. Yeah. I've got mine. I've got the one that Jason made, the CoCo 6-pin DIN to USB thing. It's a godsend for emulation to use a real CoCo joystick. Okay, so that's the joystick adapter he's talking about, not the Sega to CoCo adapter.
An official Tandy product, an official Tandy computer product after all these years.
Oh, really? And it's even official Tandy. Oh my God, that would be so awesome. Would that mean that we'll have even official Tandy deluxe joysticks we can purchase again to go with that?
I doubt that one, but
you could bundle them with Popstar Pilot.
So one of the things I am planning on having is I think I can squeeze it into my suitcase. I'm planning on bringing my CoCo 3 and a little square flat panel television, and I want to be able to have Popstar Pilot on display. So because I'm also going to be selling copies of Popstar Pilot, that will be there. So my new DVD and Popstar Pilot will be there because those are I can afford to order and ship those. So those will be there. So that'd be kind of cool to have Popstar Pilot on display. I'm going to bring a Wyco controller too, so I'm probably going to pick up a Sega adapter from Neil when I get there so we can play Popstar on a nice old Wyco arcade style controller. I think that'll be kind of cool. Let everybody test drive and test fly Popstar Pilot and everything.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think we should have a high score contest.
That's a great idea. High score contest. Yeah.
Well, I would stop at that one.
And the winner will get a date with Curtis Boyle.
You mean the loser?
Oh, well then, Steve, you already have a date with Curtis.
The loser? Oh, man. Yeah, that'll be cool. Yeah, too bad I won't be able to play Farfall on the CoCo 3. I could demo Farfall. I'm sure Farfall will be demoed somewhere in the building.
Well, that's one thing I thought was cool when you're talking about Ed having room in his FPGA replacement. He's going to try to fix, or might try to fix the Simographics modes for the CoCo 3. That might be cool. So then people will quit harassing me about a CoCo 3 version of Farfall.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Or it could just be that could just be the next version, the sequel.
Well, yeah, it could be. Although I've already got an idea for a next version that might involve the music chip.
Darren Grant has said the problem with reissuing the deluxe joysticks is the molds no longer exist, so it would need retooling at a cost of $20,000 plus. Okay, we'll pass. We'll pass on that.
You know, we just need a couple of thousand CoCo people to want to buy them, right?
Yeah.
Basically, the entire Facebook group.
You got to start one of those Kickstarter campaigns for that or something, huh?
I like Softmaster's comment here too. He said if there's room, Ed could include Farfall right on the chip.
Could be like an Easter egg.
Actually, on those joysticks, didn't that exact same joystick design they used for the IBM compatible ones as well?
Yeah. It was actually made by Kraft. It was made by Kraft. Kraft made it, so there was the Kraft version, there was the Tandy version, and there was the IBM version. So there were a lot of versions of that floating around. But still, if the molds don't exist, then what can you do? We get John Strong to 3D print them for us. Build Farfall onto the chip. Wasn't that done with one of the other boards where something was built into the MC10 board? A couple of games were built into that.
Yeah, well, Ed included them in his cartridge ROM or whatever.
Yeah, so it was the Space Intruders, I think, and it might even have been Flagenbird or something like that was put on there.
Xmas Rush.
Or was it Christmas Rush? You gave him Christmas Rush to put on there.
No,
okay.
I'm saying he didn't. He could have.
He could have, because it would have run on the MC10, right?
Yes, there's an MC10 version. A little awkward to use, but because the arrow keys are in the wrong place.
Yeah. All right. Well, to use John Linville's term, have we about beat this one to death?
Should we hold the mirror up?
I'm going to see if the uncles are still alive here. We definitely talked about a lot on CoCo TALK. I wish I could pronounce this guy's name. Does anybody know how to pronounce this guy's name? Or is it Reitveld? Reitveld? He was chiming in on one of Steve Bamford's response, saying that if you've got a good game and a good game, a good gameplay would sell a cartridge, regardless if it's an elaborate game or a CoCo 1 or 2 game. Some of those discussions were taking place.
I've been trying to encourage people, even if you want to port, Yahtzee or some dumb board game or whatever, I think people will buy the games, at least in small quantities.
Yeah.
And if that's on your bucket list to say that you produced a cartridge game for an old computer,
yeah,
we can make it happen. Small quantities are fine.
Sure. I would like to be one of those people. If I can ever get to my next project, which is learning assembly, whatever crap I can crank out in assembly, let's put that crap on a cartridge. And that's the working title right now, Crap on a Cartridge.
Just remember to get the right P mode 4.
So that's I mean, it's like if it'll fit, and it almost seems like size isn't even that much of an issue now if you can handle bank switching. But if you can get your game to fit on a cartridge, it seems like there's more benefits to doing it with than without, because of the tangibility, the collectability, the obscurity of it, because there aren't that many cartridges being made. I think you're more likely to sell something on a cartridge than on other mediums. That would be my guess, anyways.
That's the story. I think with Bouncy Ball, or one of the main things is kept Bouncy Ball off of cartridges, and I don't know exactly why. If it relates to him using CMOC as opposed to regular assembly or what, but apparently the size of the binary is rather big, and the
data files too. So
yeah, so that keeps it off a cartridge. But I don't know.
Yeah, what's the size of a floppy? A floppy is like what, 158K or 185K or something like that?
153K for an RS-DOS formatted.
Okay. So with bank switching, it could be done, but you got to write your software now to pull things not from a file off of a disk now, but from a new location in memory or something like that, right? So the actual way you develop your software would change, I would imagine. I haven't gotten that far in understanding these things yet. Yeah.
It depends. And if anything, it's usually easier to go pull something out of memory, but if it's bank switch, you'll have to figure out what bank it is and that sort of stuff. But still,
I mean, if you're programming CoCo 3 already, I mean, if you're using the MMU, you're bank switching already. It's just a different method.
Okay. Like, is that something, Nick, that you could do with Popstar Pilot? Is possibly have a ROM cartridge version of that at some point in time?
When the appropriate bank switching ROM cartridge comes out, yeah.
Yeah, because I know yours also loads level data.
Well, Popstar Pilot is only 45 or 48k in total, including all the graphics and sound. So you just need some way of putting it all onto a ROM, and then booting the ROM would just put those areas of memory where they should be off the ROM, and away you go.
Hopefully, we'll have something at CoCoFEST that could do that or store that.
Or get Barry Nelson to write a utility just to convert it to work off of Flash or something.
Well, it works off by CoCo SDC just fine.
That's true. It just seems like that's the solution for everything, doesn't it?
You need a CoCo SDC with a sound chip. That's what we need.
With the sound chip. There you go.
I did suggest that years ago, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, then now you get into the address space again too, because if you're competing with the disk I/O, then it's got to be redone.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Darren was working on the next generation type of SDC with a sound chip.
That's not going ahead.
That looked cool.
I did chase that up.
Yeah.
And it wasn't with the sound chip though. He was just using the existing PC what's it called? PCW
PCM?
or what? No, it was some PWM or whatever.
Yeah,
facility on the microcontroller. Yeah, so it wouldn't have been a real sound chip either.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, I thought he was going to throw an engine in there for us.
No.
Okay.
Usable, but not a sound chip.
Yeah, it would just be basically another DAC.
Yeah, I understand how the PWMs exactly work, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't even want to discuss PWM right now.
Yeah, Glenn Hewitt just mentioned something. He watched the last CoCo Talk when we were talking about compiled sprites. He said he never heard about them, but it sounds like very cool stuff. Yeah. We got lots of things to talk about. We should probably save some for another CoCo Talk because we're 2 weeks away. So next week we can talk about being 1 week away from CoCoFEST, and hopefully we'll have more topics to discuss then. We don't want to beat this talk to death too. We have 14 people still with us. We've maintained a good dozen or so viewers the entire 2 hours and 21 minutes we've been doing this right now. So that's kind of cool. I really appreciate everybody who's watching this, and I appreciate everybody who's taken time out of their weekend to be here with us to talk CoCo. I love talking about the CoCo. I love listening about the CoCo. I can't get enough CoCo. And our party is a little bit smaller, but we had a few more people here earlier. We had Mike Rowan was here before. Barry Nelson was here. We still have Nick Morentis and Bill Noble and John Strong and David Ward and Curtis Boyle and John Linville, Brett Gordon and Sockmaster are still with us, and not to mention the 14 or so people in the chat. Thank you all. We'll do it again next week, and this video will be available for replay later. So if something comes up, you got some questions, leave us a comment here, or leave us a comment in the Facebook group, or leave us a comment on the CoCo list, and we'll have more things to talk about next week. Anything you guys want to say before we sign off?
Is this the new regular time for the show? Saturday at 5?
I don't know. It could be.
Seems to work.
I think it does
people.
help. I think it does help with the European and the Australian people. Giving them an opportunity, because having it on Sunday before was a bit of an issue, because like for Nick it was already Monday morning for work. So.
Right. Well, we could do that. Yeah, I was trying to balance Nick's time because at 5 p.m. it's what, 7 a.m. for you, Nick?
6 or 7, yeah. 7 I think it was, yeah.
So yeah, so we got. I guess it's a little bit of a balancing act, but you know, maybe we can even So if this time works, it works for me. I think the only thing that happens now is that it's 5 p.m. and it's going to be cutting into people's dinner time. You know, so that may or may not be a thing. So maybe next time we'll have to have this at maybe a TGI Fridays or something. We'll get the endless appetizers while we do it. So, so
are we going to try to set up a live one at the CoCoFEST?
We could. Yeah, why not? Why the heck not? Why
you could
not
throw
have
a camera
live...
on the CoCoFest show floor or whatever, and then people like, come in and chat and actually see. You know, somebody can say, "Oh, I'd really like to see what is that John Linville's booth." We can even take the camera over or something.
That's a great idea. Well, I'm already going to be live streaming all of the talks. So, but the normal talks that are scheduled for our presenters will be live streamed. But yeah, when there's not a scheduled thing, we'll figure out a time to have a CoCo Talk. Maybe Sunday night might be a good time unless everybody's going out of town. But yeah, it's a great idea. A live CoCo Talk from CoCoFest. Well, that's Curtis.
People that either can't make it for time constrictions or not enough funds or whatever.
Yeah, Curtis, you've just earned yourself a bonus this year. All right, remind me to pay you and give you a bonus. Okay.
I paid that dime when I get to this year.
Hard American currency, no less, too. So
it's worth like 15 cents Canadian. So
yeah. Great. Well, Sock Master, thank you for being here. It is a pleasure to speak to you in person for the first time for me. I definitely appreciate everything you've done for the color computer, and I appreciate playing your games and even having you comment on my videos and everything else. And I look forward to somehow being able to play Donkey Kong Jr. Remix at some point in time.
Well, thank you. Maybe I'll try porting it, but I have thinking about it, it's like that really doesn't work so well, but who knows?
Yeah, no.
Well, if anybody can pull it off, it'd be you.
Yeah.
And maybe one day I'll just plant the seed now. Maybe I can get Curtis and a few people together. We can do a Sock Master interview and talk about your body of work or something if you're ever interested in doing that. I'd love to do that in the future.
Maybe, sure.
Okay. All right, guys. John Strong, thank you. Bill Noble, thank you. Nick Morentis, good eye to you.
Good eye.
So, all right, guys. We'll wrap this up, and we'll do this again in about a week's time. And thank you all, and thank you everybody who watched. And we'll see you next week on CoCo Talk.
And just remember, you are only young once. You can be retro forever.
Say that again one more time, John. I love that quote.
You were only young once, but you can be retro forever.
That's
there
true.
You go. So go forth and be retro, everyone. Take care.